In a brutal world where commoners are treated like absolute dirt, one broke kid actually dared to dream of casting spells. His very first mentor, a literal crazy old homeless guy. But after years of absolute hellish training, our boy levels up into a totally overpowered mercenary mage. Yet instead of grinding to become some legendary warrior, he lands the most random side quest ever, babysitting spoiled rich noble girls and teaching them some basic manners. But somehow, every single arrogant brat he takes under his wing actually glows up into a flawless top-tier mage. So can a literal street orphan actually flex his way into becoming the most goated? Flashback to the gritty streets of Ebelstein. Total scammer. That was the actual vibe the slum locals got from this ragged, washed-up grandpa. In reality, he had only ever unlocked the absolute bare minimum first-star magic. But the guy had zero chill, constantly flexing and calling himself some grand mage, while throwing massive, unhinged tantrums. He would literally rage out whenever street kids tried to troll him. Yet this was the exact same lunatic who first taught magic to our young protagonist, Derek. It wasn't some deep-fated bond either. The old geezer just desperately wanted a hype man, and Derek desperately needed the lore. Months of the daily grind dragged on until one random day, Derek actually tapped into the mana flow, leaving the old man absolutely shook. The second he felt that energy surge, his eyes snapped open, his hand shot out, and bam! He blasted a magic arrow straight into a tree trunk, while his teachers... So our main guy spent an entire year stuck by this old dude's side, running his mundane errands, all to officially awaken as a first-star mage. Later that evening, chilling around a campfire, the old man started dropping heavy lore about the world beyond Ebelstein's northern walls. He claimed these insanely privileged noble kids were hitting the third star before even reaching adulthood, while a peasant like him could grind his entire life and still barely scrape by. He brutally warned Derek to check his ego, making it perfectly clear he would shatter the second he hit a real roadblock in life. The geezer constantly yapped on and on about bloodlines, heavily pushing the toxic idea that magic was... Basically, if you weren't born lucky, all your hardcore grinding meant absolutely nothing. He relentlessly tried to brainwash the kid with this super depressing reality check about the massive, unbreakable wall separating the rich elites from the dirty commoners. Honestly, it was probably just massive copium for all the crazy dreams he totally failed to achieve in his own pathetic life. That night dragged on with a super heavy vibe, and the very next day, Derek rolled back to their hideout, only to find the old man lying completely lifeless. His body was absolutely wrecked, covered in gnarly bruises, like he had taken a brutal beatdown, leaving Derek assuming some random street brawl finally took him out. But the actual tea dropped later. The city guards were the ones who literally beat him to a pulp. Word on the street was he got busted trying to swipe a second-star spellbook from a warehouse, which made zero sense. Like, why would this washed-up dude with zero ambition randomly risk his life for that? Derek laid the old guy to rest, but out of nowhere, a glowing system prompt literally popped in his face, dropping the notification that he had just unlocked the core fundamentals of magic. He finally had the chance to lock in his main magic class, but no takebacks allowed. Yet the old scammer's endless yapping about noble blood still echoed heavily in his mind. Sadly, hitting the genetic jackpot wasn't even an option for him, considering he wasn't even originally from this universe. Cut to 4 whole years later. Enter Katya Flameheart, the former boss lady of the totally ruined Viscount Flameheart family. Even though her noble house crashed, she still hit hard as a legit third-star mage. Basically, every single mercenary guild practically begged to recruit her, but she stayed locked in Ebelstein, taking on hardcore bounties through the Beldorn mercenary crew. She totally took Derek under her wing when he joined the squad as a teen, helping him max. Grinding alongside a high-tier pro like Katya taught him insanely valuable lessons. She straight up told him it was completely natural for any mage to crave that ultimate power-up. She knew he was totally cracked with talent, but warned him that getting way too thirsty for power would actually hard nerf his growth. Derek simply nodded, locking that advice in. She instructed him to shut his eyes totally, vibe with his inner mana, and track exactly where the raw energy sparked and rippled through his core. His task was to literally visualize his raw energy, forcing his imagination into reality. As he channeled it, she realized this kid was packing a seriously massive mana pool. Thanks to all his raw, street-fighting experience, his mana control was absolutely flawless. Then his eyes suddenly snapped wide open, catching her completely off guard. Boom! A massive explosion violently shook the entire tavern, instantly sending the mercs into full panic mode, thinking they were getting ambushed. The whole squad rushed in with weapons drawn. Out of nowhere, Katya desperately snatched his hand. "Wait, what's going on?" he stammered, completely thrown off by her sudden "Zip it and just move," she hissed. They bolted out of the tavern, blowing right past the completely spooked mercenary crew. She aggressively dragged him into a shady, dead-end alleyway, heavily scanning the shadows to make absolutely sure they were alone. Spinning around with dead serious eyes, she demanded he listen to every single word. The intense, heavy vibe definitely had him sweating bullets. "Look," she whispered sharply. "Nobles are obsessively paranoid about holding on to their elite status, and throwing magic around is their absolute biggest flex. Society acts like raw talent is a total blessing from above, but that privilege strictly belongs to the elites. For a nobody commoner to actually touch the third star, usually it takes a whole lifetime of grinding to reach that level of magic. Yet here he was, casually dropping a second star illusion spell known as auditory hallucination. Yeah, you heard that right. By 14, he had already leveled up to a second star mage. Following that milestone, Katya hit the road with him, mentoring him in all sorts of advanced spells, while occasionally spilling the tea about her glamorous past life, rubbing elbows with high society nobles. Fast forward a year, and Katya had to bounce. Word on the street was that the prestigious Elster County headhunted her to be a private tutor. Now, the Elster clan wasn't just old money. They held so much clout that even the capital's Grand Duke had to tread carefully around them, purely because Count Elster backed their faction. For Katya, this gig was an absolute no-brainer. Snagging a role as a high-tier noble's magic instructor was the ultimate flex for any mage. Before she left, Katya handed him a parting gift, a super rare second-star spellbook, packed with high-level arcane knowledge he still needed to master. We are talking devastating combat spells, mind-bending transformation magic, insane summoning techniques, and advanced tracking runes. Give the kid 12 months and he grinded completely solo to unlock and perfect 2 more second-star spells. All of this insane progress by age 16. And spoiler alert, he wasn't about to hit the brakes. Striding into Beldrin's Tears Tavern like it was just another Tuesday, he was greeted by the owner Jaden, who hyped up some massive news they finally scored a legit commission, straight from the Grand Duchy of Duplin. He totally gets how huge that is, right? Derek was skeptical, asking why a top-tier noble house would ever stoop to hiring a bunch of tavern mercs. Jaden just flashed a cheeky, "Come on, it is Duplin. Their pockets are deep." Jaden practically shook Derek with pure hype, claiming that if they crushed this mission, it would unlock crazy networking opportunities for their future. Our guy casually brushed his clothes off and asked what the actual catch was. Jaden played it cool, saying it was a piece of cake, just wiping out a handful of monsters, lurking on the fringes of the Grand Duke's land. Just that Derek raised an eyebrow. Jaden nodded enthusiastically, asking if he seriously thought high-class nobles would scam. Still scratching his chin, Derek could not shake the feeling that this whole setup was super sus. Why on earth would a powerhouse family like Duplin outsource monster slaying to some low-level mercenary squad? Hard pass. He turned his back to bounce, but Jaden frantically begged him to hold up. Derek just glanced back and told the guy to hire literally anyone else. He made it crystal clear, no sketchy quests. Desperate Jaden admitted that if he had any other options, he would not be begging right now. They specifically demanded a mage. And let us be real, finding a spellcaster slumming it with mercenaries these days is basically impossible. Derek was the only guy for the job. That was the whole reason he dragged him in. But our boy wasn't buying it. Why exactly did they need a literal mage to squash a couple of stray beasts? He wanted zero part in whatever shady business this was. But just as he stepped to the door, Jaden flicked a solid gold coin through the air. Derek snatched it mid-flight effortlessly. Jaden smirked, revealing that this wasn't the total payout, it was just the upfront deposit. So he caved and took the gig. Soon after, he pulled up to meet the VIP clients, a ridiculously intense-looking dude, a warm-hearted woman, and a totally mysterious girl hiding under a hood. Jaden squeezed Derek's shoulder, whispering a frantic reminder to act respectful around them, since these were the big spenders. The moment the intense guy locked eyes with our boy, he scoffed, demanding to know why they were trying to pawn off an underage kid as a mercenary. He mentioned he had heard rumors about this guild shining during the Dawn War, so he actually came in with high hopes. But he was low-key insulted they were tossing a teenager into a deadly mission. Jaden desperately hyped Derek up, swearing the kid was an absolute beast in combat. Hands down, the most overpowered mage in their roster. The guy wasn't having any of it, though, pivoting toward the door and snapping that their mission was way too high, but the woman cut him off, murmuring something low into his ear. Their eyes flicked over to the hooded girl, and just like that, they flipped their stance and gave Derek the green light. Next thing you know, the whole squad was rolling out to the Grand Duchy of Duplin. Out in the field, our guy went full beast mode. He sniped the first one with a magic arrow, cleanly decapitated the second, and when a third tried to pull a sneaky flank, he just casually blasted it into ash with a lightning bolt. Without breaking a sweat, he turned back to the clients who had been staring in absolute shock, and flatly announced the area was cleared. The gruff dude swallowed his pride, begrudgingly admitting the kid just speedran a whole horde of monsters. Meanwhile, a soft smile crept onto the mysterious girl's face. Later that night, back at the tavern, the gossip dropped. Feline was absolutely furious, snapping at Derek. "So what, you're just some rich noble's lapdog now?" She actually hopped onto the bar counter, raging, while a stressed Jaden begged her to get down, before she completely wrecked the vibe for the other customers. Ignoring him completely, she popped off, yelling that no matter how broke and pathetic us commoners might be, we never stoop to being a noble's loyal pet. Jaden sighed and cut in. "Wait, did Derek actually tell you how much we scored for this gig?" Feline scoffed with attitude. "Oh yeah, how much did it take for him to totally sell out and lick their boots?" Jaden deadpanned that bootlicking was actually not in the contract. He flashed a subtle hand sign, leaving her confused. 1 silver coin, she guessed. Smiling, he just shook his head. Her eyes widened, instantly switching up. "A whole gold coin. Bruh, point me to their boots right now." Our boy finally groaned, telling her to zip it, and quickly clarified that absolutely no one was crawling for anybody. Once Feline got completely wasted and passed out cold, the guy turned to Derek, grilling him about how his mission went. Derek just shrugged it off, saying it was a total snooze fest. He'd merely wiped out a handful of trash-tier goblins, and that was a wrap. The guy fired back, asking if their first impression fell totally flat. But they were practically dripping in gold, right? Derek nodded, revealing that all 3 of them were lying through their teeth. That so-called noble officer claimed he was hunting for 3 specific traits: youth hardcore stamina and killer communication skills. Yet tragically, that dude possessed literally 0 of those qualities. Plus the chick parading around as a lowly dishwasher. Her skin was way too flawless for someone scrubbing greasy pans all day. Even that sketchy trainee inspector was giving off major red. Jaden instantly cut him off, snapping that they were hired guns, plain and simple. Mercenaries don't pry into their clients' dark secrets. They just do the dirty work and secure the bag. Our boy kept his mouth shut, silently admitting Jaden nailed it. They were deep in the unforgiving wildlands, and out here, the ultimate prize was just waking up, breathing the next morning. Nothing else mattered. Fast forward to the next day, he hauled himself back to the duchy to absolutely shred some more monsters. After wiping the floor with the horde, he strolled up to his clients, casually announcing that the goblin squad wouldn't be showing their ugly mugs around here anytime soon. The aristocratic officer hyped up his flawless execution, prompting Jaden to immediately pivot the chat toward cashing out. Snagging 2 shiny gold coins for their trouble, Jaden enthusiastically ruffled Derek's hair, already daydreaming out loud about how they were going to spend this fat stack. Derek quickly put a pin in that idea, brushing it off for later. Suddenly, the noble officer dramatically cleared his throat, stealing the spotlight, and looked Derek dead in the eye, praising his top-tier combat skills to the heavens. Because of that raw talent, he wanted to lock him in for an exclusive, high-stakes contract. Derek didn't even blink before saying yes. The other 2 stared at him, until the guy casually dropped that the Grand Duchy was paying a staggering 15 gold coins for this gig. Jaden was instantly hooked, and our MC officially sealed the deal. Packing up their gear in a flash, the squad marched straight toward the lavish Duplin estate. Jaden scoped out the insane architecture, openly admitting that the Grand Duke's crib was flexing some serious luxury. Right before crossing the threshold, the noble officer paused, deciding it was time to drop the act and properly Jaden laughed, telling him to cut the stiff formalities, since they were basically old buddies at this point. The man smirked, revealing his real name was Dylan. He wasn't some random officer, but the actual head steward directly serving the Grand Duke. He offered a smooth apology for masking his true VIP status, blaming it on the shady nature of his job. Jaden was left completely speechless. Then, the dishwasher stepped up, revealing herself as Katerina, the Grand Duke's head maid. Jaden instantly started sweating, panicking that he was chilling with literal high society elites and hadn't shown proper respect. He nervously bowed down, blurting out his own name, while Derek mentally pieced it all together. So homeboy was the chief steward, not a basic desk clerk, and the chick was definitely no scrub, but the head maid running the estate. He had sniffed out their lies, but realizing they were absolute heavyweights still hit differently. Suddenly, the mysterious girl stepped gracefully out of the carriage, prompting a stunned Jaden to ask, "Wait, then who is she?" She slowly pulled back her hood, unleashing a waterfall of silky jet-black hair, instantly captivating Derek's full attention. Looking majestic, she announced herself as Asseline Eleanor Duplan, the bombshell. She wanted to personally recruit him to be the magic tutor for her little sister Diella. He was totally thrown off, a gritty mercenary hired to mentor a blue-blooded princess. Meanwhile, over at the manor, Ray violently kicked open the doors to the Duke's. Frantic, he demanded his dad and brother Valerian look at the disaster unfolding. But Duke Raymond Oswald Duplin didn't even bother lifting his eyes from his paperwork, coldly ordering his son to act his age and maintain his dignity. Ray lost his cool, screaming that he wasn't the one who needed a lesson in manners. That was entirely on Diella. She had officially crossed the line, violently lashing out at the very staff he had hired. He angrily pointed at a sobbing maid, completely traumatized by the youngest daughter's psychotic little prank. Valerian calmly told his brother to lower his voice, since they were in the middle of a meeting, but Ray completely blew him off. Boiling with rage, he shouted that a whopping 10 servants had already rage quit just last month alone. And that wasn't even counting the fact that she treated the mansion like a personal smash room, trashing everything in sight whenever she threw a tantrum. Storming right up to his dad's massive oak desk, he demanded to know how much longer they were going to pretend this little menace wasn't tearing their family apart. Valerian shot up from his chair, his voice cracking like a whip, as he warned Ray to shut his mouth. That was enough disrespect. The Duke signaled to let the boy vent. Ray shot his brother a venomous glare before turning back to his dad, arguing that even if Diella was a total lost cause, they still had Asseline to carry the family legacy. Because of that, it was high time they cut the dead weight and abandoned Diella. Raymond finally stopped riding his chilling gaze and icily reminded him that this decision was way above his pay grade. Refusing to back down, Ray confessed he'd already ordered the head steward to scout out a remote monastery. Word on the street was the living conditions were decent, and plenty of elite aristocratic kids got dumped there. Honestly, instead of leeching off the family name, wouldn't it be a million times better for her to just pledge her life to serving God? If her toxic vibe was dragging the entire bloodline through the mud, exiling her was the only logical play. In a split second, the Duke unleashed his terrifying wrath, brutally slamming Ray's face right into the solid wood desk, roaring that he had already made it crystal clear this wasn't his damn choice to make. With blood rushing to his head, Ray gritted his teeth and spat back that sooner or later the Duke would be forced to pull the trigger. Meanwhile, halfway across the estate, Asseline was personally escorting Derek to meet the scary patriarch himself. She threw out a casual question: had he ever heard of her little sister? He admitted spotting her name buried deep in the Duplain family records, and a flash of sadness crossed her face as she sighed, realizing her sister was practically a ghost to the outside world. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of her father's office swung wide, revealing her brothers. Her face lit up as she called out to Valerian. Flashing a warm smile, he mentioned it had been way too long. He asked how she was holding up in Ebelstein. She hit him with a sweet reply, saying his support made life a breeze. He brushed it off with a shy wave, hinting that Ray looked a little banged up, so they'd catch up later. Our guy scanned the two brothers, his gaze shifting to a sobbing maid nearby. The duo then stepped into the grand office. After the father-daughter duo exchanged some quick life updates, she finally dropped the intro. Meet Derek, the brand new magic tutor she dragged all the way from Ebelstein. Derek stepped up, declaring he'd handle Diella's training. Raymond barely blinked, totally unbothered. Taking the hint, she stood up to leave her busy dad alone. But the Duke's voice cut through the room, ordering Derek to freeze. Without even looking up from his paperwork, he casually pointed out that Derek looked way too young. 16, right, Derek nodded. The Duke pressed on, asking about his magic skills. Derek played it cool, claiming he could only scrape by with some basic one-star spells. Raymond's eyes finally snapped up, sparking with intrigue. He warned him not to play dumb, dropping the cold, hard truth that being humble isn't always a flex. Our boy stared back, realizing his fake modesty wasn't going to fool a 5-star mage like the Grand Duke. He quickly apologized for the cap. Raymond waved it off, saying he totally got it. Flexing too much raw talent at a young age is basically a death sentence. Plus, judging by his worn-out fit and age, he definitely didn't scream elite magic tutor. Derek straight up admitted he was a street-level mercenary. Raymond sighed. Since his daughter personally handpicked him, he dropped the interrogation. He gave the green light, ordering a maid to escort the kid to Diella's quarters. Interview over. But Derek didn't budge, asking for one last word. The Duke nodded. Derek went full professional, stating that as a merc, he sees every mission through to the bitter end. His job was to turn Lady Diella into a proper high society mage, and he was going to deliver. Lady Aseline paid him, and he'd do right by the noble house. Raymond raised an eyebrow, asking why he was wasting breath on obvious facts. He shot back that he had a high-stakes favor to ask. Now the Duke was hooked. Cut to Diella's room, total chaos. The bratty noble was literally launching porcelain plates at a terrified maid, who was sobbing out apologies. Diella scoffed viciously, asking if a pathetic sorry was supposed to fix her ruined status. She screamed at the girl to vanish, before she shattered the next plate right across her face. The shaking maid bolted for her life. Meanwhile, out in the hallway, Aseline was spilling the tea with Jaden, while Derek handled her dad. Jaden was baffled why this kid elite magic tutors were literally begging to work at the Duplain estate. Plus, a street-level commoner trying to boss around a sport. Aseline sighed, dropping the bombshell that she had already burned through every top-tier magic master on the continent, and every single one of them had rage quit. So she switched tactics, hunting for skilled mages who were broke and desperate. Even with his gritty mercenary past, Derek somehow gave off major high society vibes. Jaden nodded, pointing out that the kid's mentor was actually a ruined, washed-up nobleman, which explained his polished manners. Aseline flashed a hopeful smile, calling him refined and genuinely sweet. She figured his gentle vibe would be perfect to gently tame her wild sister. Jaden absolutely lost it, laughing out loud and telling her she seriously needed a reality check on reading people. Derek was a hardcore street survivor, taking on bloody mercenary work before he even hit 18. Her naive brain had actually convinced her that street kids survived by being polite and nice. Jaden's harsh truth left her shook. Back to our boy. The head steward walked him to Diella's chaotic quarters. He gave the door a solid knock, dead silence, so he just pushed his way in. He dropped his introduction, and she cooed at him to step a little closer. The second he was in range, her lips curled into a wicked smirk, and bam! She dumped a massive bucket of disgusting slop right in his face. Derek didn't even flinch. Feigning shock, she mockingly gasped, calling it a huge, clumsy mistake. She giggled, claiming she thought a filthy sewer rat had scurried inside. Was he the supposedly tough mercenary the manager mentioned, or just a knockoff? Looking at his dripping face, she sneered, deciding he really was just garbage. Not satisfied, she dragged a chair right in front of him, stepped up like a total menace, and unleashed a second bucket of nasty water over his head. She cheerfully chirped that this one was a special welcome gift. Bet this reminds you of your filthy home, right? She taunted that the garbage looked totally suited his vibe. Through it all, Derek stood dead silent, like a statue. Bored, she tossed the empty bucket aside, pouting that she was all out of ammo. What a shame. But as she looked down, her cocky grin faded. Derek hadn't snapped. He hadn't yelled. He just locked his dead, unblinking eyes right. She planted her foot right into his chest, booting him backward. "Who gave you the right to look at me like that?" she shrieked. The impact sent him crashing straight into a filthy puddle. Wrinkling her nose like she just smelled hot garbage, she yanked off her ruined heel. "Ugh, you absolutely reek," she spat, chucking the expensive shoe violently at his face. A wicked smirk crept across her face as she told him to remember his place at the bottom of the food chain. Like some gutter trash could ever be. Didn't the streets teach you any basic manners? Back in the main estate, Duke Dupain stared out his massive window, his mind flashing back to a heavy chat he had with Derek. Derek had laid it out straight. The very fact he was called in meant Lady Diella. He'd looked the Duke dead in the eye and asked, Since you cherish her so much, how much power are you actually handing me to fix your daughter? Clearly the Duke had handed over total control, even the power to strike back. Smack. Completely stunned, Diella pressed a trembling. A bright red handprint blossomed across her skin as Derek stared her down with ice-cold eyes. "Get on your feet," he commanded, his voice dead serious. When she glared back and refused to budge, he slapped her a second time. Her brain short-circuited. Literally no one in her entire life had ever dared to lay a finger on her. The scene shifts to 3 years ago. Derek was heading out on a dangerous mission alongside his mentor. He had asked her a hypothetical. If you were stuck mentoring a totally stubborn brat who spat on your kindness, what's your move? Katya chewed on the thought for a second. She warmly replied that she'd dig deep to understand them, embrace their flaws, and smother them with genuine care. Derek scoffed. Isn't that way too naive? What happens when you're dealing with a psycho, where basic empathy literally doesn't work? She calmly explained that a true teacher's core job is steering a lost kid toward a brighter path. If soft words and patience bounce right off them, then you have to completely scrap the nice guy act and find a... When he pushed for details, her answer was chillingly simple. You have to plant pure, absolute fear into their soul. Snapping back to reality, Derek was channeling that exact advice. He glared down at the spoiled brat, ordering her to start treating people with basic human decency and respect. "Do not make me tell you twice. Stand up," he growled. She scrambled to her feet, but immediately lunged forward, slapping him right back. "Are you insane? How dare a filthy commoner touch me?" she screamed. Derek didn't flinch. He just delivered another brutal slap. "I despise repeating myself," he warned. "When you interact with people, you will show them respect. Period." But instead of backing down, an arrogant smirk twisted her lips. She shrieked at the top of her lungs, summoning the head butler, her voice dripping with fake outrage. "Are you blind? Do something. This absolute peasant just assaulted a noblewoman." The butler, trailing a panicked squad of maids, came bursting through the doors. He rushed to her side, frantically checking her glowing red cheek. Then he whipped around, glaring daggers at Derek. "Have you lost your mind?" Striking the young lady. "When His Grace hears about this, you are completely dead meat." Unbothered, Derek casually reached into his coat, pulling out an official wax-sealed scroll. He shoved it in the butler's face, casually stating that the Duke had handed him absolute, unquestionable control over Diella's discipline. Any method necessary was greenlit. Delon's eyes went wide as he scanned the Duke's signature. Diella stared at the paper, absolutely mortified and entirely speechless. Cut to that night. Valerian, fresh off hearing the insane rumors, was storming down the hallway toward Derek's room, in a blind rage, completely ignoring his brother trying to hold him back. He kicked the door open. "So you're the dirty mercenary," he roared. Derek barely glanced up from his book before Valerian lunged, grabbing his collar and throwing a wild punch. "You laid hands on my sister." Ray frantically tackled his brother from behind, begging him to chill out and use his words. Derek didn't even blink, calmly stating he had the Duke's total blessing. Ray wrestled Valerian backward, hissing a harsh reminder Derek was a VIP guest brought in by Aseline. If Valerian threw a tantrum now, he'd completely trash her reputation in the family. Plus, their own father had signed off on the beatdown. Taking a massive shaky breath, Valerian swallowed his pride and ordered Derek to follow him. Ray groaned, telling his hot-headed brother to drop it and just mind his own business. But Valerian stormed out into the hall anyway. Left behind, Ray shot Derek and "Look, man, I heard what went down," Ray whispered. Honestly, Diella desperately needed a harsh reality check to fix that toxic attitude. "Don't sweat it, Valerian. Won't actually hurt you." Derek just gave a quiet nod and stepped out to follow the angry brother. Watching them leave, Ray couldn't help but wonder, why was Valerian riding so hard for that hopeless girl? Valerian silently guided Derek down a dusty corridor, pushing open the door to an old nursery. "Diella used to live in this exact room," he muttered. "Nothing has been touched since." Derek scanned the quiet space, his eyes locking onto a framed canvas. Valerian stepped up right beside him, his voice softening. "She used to be Whenever she'd show me her sketches, her face would turn bright red. It was honestly adorable, but she never actually finished a single piece. She'd always leave these massive blank spaces, only painting the tiny details she actually cared about." Valerian sighed heavily. "Look, I need to apologize for swinging on you back there. I completely lost my cool." Derek brushed it off, saying it was water under the bridge. But seriously, why drag me all the way to this dusty room? Valerian met his gaze dead on. Because I needed you to see that Diella isn't just some monster who deserves to be hated and slapped around. Somewhere down the line, she got brainwashed by this sick obsession with pureblood status. It got so bad they literally exiled her from the main estate. I still have zero clue what twisted her into this villain. While Valerian vented, Derek's sharp eyes drifted toward a bizarre stack of books on the shelf. Valerian gripped his fists. We have to stop them from locking her away in the monastery. If she can just master a single one-star magic spell, I can use that to beg our father for mercy. He gripped the guy's shoulders, practically begging him to rescue his sister. But our guy just told him to hold up. Scanning the scribbled notes crammed into the book margins, he realized she hadn't completely shut the door on magic just yet. Nodding toward the cluttered desk, he asked if all those heavy volumes were straight-up theory from the School of Charters. The guy nodded, pointing out that that's exactly where the high and mighty nobles get their education. Derek shot a look at a half-finished canvas in the corner, slammed the dusty book shut, and shoved it into Valerian's chest. He agreed to give it a shot. Cut to the dead of night. Diella was knocked out of nowhere. Our guy dumped a freezing bucket of water right on her face. She shot up out of bed, screaming her lungs out. He just smirked, asking how she could possibly be sleeping right now. Jaw clenched in pure fury, she snapped back, demanding to know if he'd completely lost his mind. Ignoring her tantrum, he snatched her wrist, telling her it was time for a little field trip. She barked at him to let go that second, completely disgusted that a peasant dared to touch her. But he dragged her into the hallway, and she fought him the entire way, thrashing around and swearing up and down that she wasn't going anywhere with him. Spotting the household staff just standing around like she ordered them to tackle this lowlife right now. But nobody moved an inch, and Derek hauled her right out the front doors without breaking a sweat. Once they were completely out of earshot from the mansion, he brutally shoved her into the dirt. Spitting mad, she demanded to know what this little stunt was supposed to prove. Like, who did this nobody think he was to teach her anything? Leaning in, he asked if she wanted to hear a fun little... A dark grin crept across his face, as he confessed that honestly, he was just here for the thrill of wrecking stuck-up aristocrats. Genuine panic flashed in her eyes as he leaned closer, asking if that made sense to her. After all, a street rat from the gutters has zero reason to play nice with the elite. This whole private tutor gig, total scam. Just the perfect cover story to absolutely ruin spoiled little brats exactly like her. The metallic shing of his blade echoed in the air. He whispered, asking if she knew how sweet a noble's scream sounded. Trembling now, his smug smile said it all. Her family was about to ship her off to a convent anyway. Who on earth was going to believe a word she said? And hey, if things went south, he'd just pay the price with his own life. That's the exact going rate for a peasant, isn't it? Or better yet, he could just vanish into the night like a ghost. Honestly, he'd be doing Duke Dupain a massive solid by getting rid of his biggest headache. The chilling reality finally hit Diella like a truck. This guy was actually going to end her. Survival instinct kicked in. She scrambled to her feet and bolted straight for the tree line. One slip up, and she was dead meat. Sprinting back across the open meadow to the mansion was suicide. He'd run her down in seconds. Her only shot was getting lost deep in the dense wood. She knew these woods like the back of her hand, and could use the hidden trails to loop back to the estate. Then he'd be the one facing the executioner. She tore through the underbrush like a maniac. Jagged branches whipped and sliced. Out of nowhere, the dark woods lit up. She whipped her head around, eyes wide in shock, as this so-called commoner conjured a Her jaw dropped, casting a fireball. That was straight-up second-star tier magic. How the hell was a lowlife pulling that off? Derek just flashed a wicked grin and hurled the blazing inferno right at her face. Moving purely on instinct, she dove face first into the dirt. Boom! The fireball slammed into a massive oak tree, inches from her head, exploding in a shower of sparks. Terrified, she glanced back as he casually shrugged, joking that his aim. Panicking, she scrambled back up and kept sprinting, constantly checking her shoulder for the next attack. But looking back was a massive mistake. Her foot snagged hard on a jagged tree root, sending her tumbling violently into the dirt. Derek didn't miss a beat. He instantly fired off a lethal magic arrow. Catching the glow in her peripheral vision, she rolled out of the way just a split second before it hit. Staring at the glowing bolt vibrating in the soil right where her head had just been, a cold sweat washed over her. Pacing forward, he mocked her agility. He honestly couldn't believe a spoiled girl who sat indoors all day could move that insanely fast. Shooting him a terrified glare, she scrambled up and took off sprinting again. Strangely, he just stopped and watched her go. Lungs burning, she wondered how much further she could push it. Was shaking this psycho even possible? At this pace, she was a sitting duck. Meanwhile, Derek casually scanned the area using his mana. But surprisingly, the girl had completely vanished into thin air. Looking around, it suddenly clicked. This dense layout was the exact same forest from her unfinished canvas. She must have been playing hide-and-seek out here since she was a little kid. Without even knowing it, she'd been absorbing the raw mana of this endless wilderness and spilling that exact magical energy straight onto her paintings. A sudden rustle snapped him back to reality. He spun around just in time to see the bruised girl launching herself through the air, gripping a massive rock to bash his. In a flash of steel, his sword was out. He swung hard, parrying the desperate ambush with. Diella collapsed onto the harsh dirt, gasping. He stared down at her, admitting that her relentless spirit was actually completely incredible. Knowing there was absolutely zero chance of outrunning him, she finally chose to fight back. And trust me, crossing that line was terrifying for her. She desperately gasped for air, her chest heaving. He could tell immediately. Her legs were entirely dead. She was done running. Did she have any final words? Between brutal, ragged breaths, she actually let out a dark laugh, spitting back at him. Did you seriously think I'd beg? Unlike the peasants he was used to, she would absolutely never kneel. So, he might as well just end it right here. He tilted his head, asking why she was so insanely obsessed with her noble bloodline. That struck a massive nerve. Trembling, she gritted her teeth and snapped. Then what else do I even have? Without her aristocratic title, she was completely, pathetically worthless. Furious, she smashed her bare fist into the dirt, screaming that he could have at least warned her she possessed hidden mana. But he coldly brushed it off, claiming she just hadn't pushed herself. That broke her. Sobbing uncontrollably, she cried out that no matter how intensely she grinded, it was totally useless spells artwork. She was a complete disaster at all of it. A walking failure. So what do I have besides my family name? If you strip that away, who am I? The main character stayed dead silent. Then his sword flared with raw, crackling aura. She braced for the end. Hoisting the massive blade high, he bluntly stated that playtime was completely over. It was time to die. He viciously slashed downward. But suddenly, a deafening, icy shatter echoed through the air. Diella, fully expecting to meet her maker, snapped her eyes wide open. His deadly steel was completely frozen, jammed deep inside a mass. She had subconsciously summoned a magical barrier, just to survive. Staring down at her trembling palms, her mind was completely blown. Did she actually pull that off? Right then, Derek casually sheathed his weapon and offered a respectful bow. You absolutely nailed it, he smiled, apologizing for taking things so far. She glared at him, utterly bewildered. He kept smiling gently, explaining that while it wasn't exactly top-tier spellcasting, it was still pure, unfiltered aura. She had finally cracked the code. The second she realized he was never actually going to slaughter her, she completely lost it, wailing and bawling her eyes out in pure relief. Once the total meltdown passed, our guy carefully patched up her scrapes, revealing that she was undeniably born into the school of the wild. Usually high society elites are obsessed with strict textbook spellcraft. Fundamentally, all magical arts share the same roots, but the learning curve is totally different, since her vibe is purely instinctual. Forcing herself to memorize stiff, boring, aristocratic theories was basically setting herself up to crash and burn. It was like squeezing into an outfit that was 3 sizes too small. No wonder she kept flopping. Totally stunned, she asked how he figured out her exact magical typing. He calmly replied that her artwork gave it away. She could literally vibe with the natural energy in the atmosphere and paint it onto a canvas. Sorcerers naturally gifted with wild intuition start picking up on these environmental frequencies when they are literally toddlers. She scrunched her face, letting that massive revelation sink in. Tying off the final bandage, he told her she was good to go. She slowly got to her feet, inspecting his surprisingly solid first aid work. He warned her not to get cocky. Sparking her core was dope, but the grind was just starting. First thing tomorrow, boot camp officially begins. He was going to show her how to flex her aura on command. She suddenly called his name awkwardly, turning away as she mumbled a super shy, proud thank you. Giving her a beat to process everything, he simply nodded. As she trailed behind him, he casually threw out a question. That gorgeous sunset painting back at the mansion, did she paint that? Playing it cool, she claimed she had no clue. Honestly, she hadn't touched a paintbrush in ages. He just smiled, praising how insanely gorgeous the brushwork was. Immediately puffing out her chest, she bragged that it was her absolute masterpiece. And ironically, he was the very first person to actually appreciate it. The next morning, Diella leaped out of bed, completely hyped to test her magic again. A brilliant neon blue fog wrapped around her fingers. She stared laser-focused, trying to lock it down, but it instantly fizzled out like a glitch. She pouted hard. Okay, so this was definitely going to be a struggle. Stepping out into the hallway, a servant girl carrying a heavy water bucket blindly turned the corner. Spooked out of her mind, the maid leaped backward, accidentally splashing freezing water all over. The poor girl started hyperventilating, desperately pleading for mercy. Diella shot her a totally icy, annoyed glare. Terrified, the maid dropped straight to her knees, crying like she had just committed high treason. But Diella just sighed. She casually told the girl to watch her step from now on and just casually strolled away. The servant's jaw literally hit the floor. She was utterly paralyzed. Wait, no slapping, no, just letting it slide. The second the young lady was out of earshot, the rest of the staff swarmed in, frantically asking if she survived the encounter. Trembling, she nodded, whispering that the boss lady literally just told her to be careful. Her co-workers gasped, completely shook. What on earth actually went down last night? Meanwhile, back in his room, Derek was still dead to the world, completely knocked out. But out of nowhere, someone started aggressively banging on his door, with Diella shouting his name. Groaning like a zombie, he rubbed his tired eyes, swinging the door wide open. "What is going on?" he grumbled. Right behind her, the frantic butler was desperately begging the hyper young lady to chill out, but she totally brushed him off, demanding Derek show her how to harness this newfound mana. She had tried winging it, but absolutely nothing clicked. Hearing her out, Derek's eyes widened in pure shock. She quickly reminded him of his promise. He swore he would tutor her today, so it was time to step up. Instead, he just shut the door in her face, casually dropping, "Come back this afternoon." Behind that closed door, Derek actually wiped away a genuine tear of joy over her breakthrough. But out in the hall, his brush-off absolutely infuriated her, and she kept slamming her fists against the heavy wood, screaming her lungs out. Who did he think he was, telling her to wait? "Open this damn door right now and do your job." Derek just flopped back onto his bed, miraculously passing out, while she raged outside. Hours drifted by. Down another corridor, Reg was strolling along, when he caught the maids gossiping about Diella's bizarre mood swing. She hadn't smashed a single piece of china today. She didn't even slap the girl who spilled water on her. Rumor had it her magic had finally sparked to life. Catching wind of this, Reg froze in his tracks, cornering the staff to squeeze every last detail out of them. Wasting no time, he and his brother rushed straight to their father's study to drop the massive news. Reg turned to Valerian, swearing he had already grilled the head butler and the servants on repeat. Her magic was the real deal. But Reg played the skeptic, warning them not to get hyped over one tiny fluke. That instantly set Valerian off. He snapped back, insisting their sister had finally unlocked her powers, and they should be hyping her up. Reg countered, asking if he conveniently forgot her toxic track record. One lucky break shouldn't be enough to instantly scrap the plan of shipping her off to a convent. Raymond just sat there, soaking it all in with a heavy silence. Fast forward, Derek finally showed up for Diella's lesson, but she hit him with the silent treatment, cheeks completely puffed out. He casually asked if she was feeling petty. She snapped that she was furious, but he flat out told her throwing a tantrum wasn't going to fix anything. She doubled down, insisting she wasn't acting like a brat. She was genuinely mad. He kept his cool, replying that even if she kept this up, it wouldn't change the facts. Magic requires structure. She whipped around, shrieking that she was straight up pissed, raising her hand to smack him. But one freezing, lethal glare from Derek instantly locked her in place, forcing her to back down. Pulling up a chair, he laid out the harsh truth. Just because her mana had sparked didn't mean she could throw it around recklessly. Do that, and it'll blow up in her face. He spoke from bitter, first-hand experience. Chilling out is just as vital as grinding, but since she'd already burned enough time, it was time to hit the books. She hit him with a massive eye roll, scoffing that only a totally boring tutor would say that. Instantly, his gaze turned downright terrifying, daring her to find out what his alternative teaching methods looked like. A violent shiver ripped through her as memories of that nightmare flashed back, and she bolted into her seat, quietly mumbling for him to drop it. Moving on, he announced that today's grind was all about manifesting her energy. Once she could summon it on command, reaching the first star level would be an absolute breeze. The School of the Wild, he explained, throws out the strict rulebook, making it absolutely elite for a solo grind. This path gives you way more breathing room compared to the rigid school of charters. And honestly, her chaotic vibe matched it flawlessly. She blinked, demanding to know what he was implying. He didn't stutter, he meant exactly what he said. Her wild, untamed energy was basically tailor-made for this school. Throw in the fact that she carried the legendary Dupin bloodline, and she was sitting on god-tier potential. The second the word potential dropped, her entire face lit up. "Wait, seriously?" she asked, suddenly bashful. He backed it up without hesitation. If she could conjure an ice wall in a split second, the raw talent was undeniably there. Getting greedy, she gasped. "Does that mean I'm like a total prodigy?" Derek instantly humbled her, breaking down the massive gap between raw talent and actual genius. She tried to argue, but he completely shut it down. Huffing, she declared herself an absolute legend anyway, and left it at that. Just outside, Reg was lurking by the window, eavesdropping on every single word, his jaw clenched in pure anxiety. Bright and early the next morning, Diella burst into Derek's room, absolutely buzzing, because she finally summoned her magic. The only catch, she couldn't aim it to save her life. Flash forward another 24 hours. Derek was just trying to eat his breakfast in peace when she ambushed him again, demanding he check out her mana flow. She tried to channel pure frost, but the spell completely fizzled out. And then came another morning. She practically stalked him around the estate, begging for answers. Derek was so exhausted, he was running out of hiding spots, eventually escaping to the gardens just to read. But Diella tracked him down like a hound. Stomping over, she glared down at him. What was he even doing out here? She ordered him to stick strictly to the annex. Did he seriously think her dad hooked him up with those elite spell books, just so he could slack off in the bushes? Unbothered, Derek shot back that slacking off was exactly why he got them. Furious, she snatched his wrist, dragging him all the way back to their training room, hyping up her latest magical breakthrough. She claimed she nailed the release technique he taught her, so he better test it right this second. Meanwhile, the clock kept ticking. Across the estate, Valerian summoned Derek for a private chat. Dropping into their seats, Valerian immediately pressed for updates on Diella. Derek assured him she was making serious strides. But locking down that first star magic? Yeah, that was definitely going to take a bit more grinding. Valerian dropped a quick heads up his mom was wrapping up her socialite tour and heading back sometime next week, promising to warn him before the storm hit. She absolutely wasn't the type you could just chill around. Sure, the estate staff was laid back enough, but highborn nobles, they were practically allergic to seeing a commoner holding any real power. Derek already knew the drill, right? Derek casually nodded, saying he'd keep his guard up. That was exactly why Valerian had pulled him aside. A heavy shadow crossed Valerian's face. He pushed himself out of his chair, declaring the massive weight of being the future head of House Duplan, meaning that in his position, he had to back up and embrace every single person under his roof. To pull that off, he had to keep it 100% real with all of them. But honestly, it was insanely tough. People's hearts were just way too messy and unpredictable. Life would be a total breeze if everyone just shared the exact same vibe and values. But reality check things never work out like that. Derek narrowed his eyes. So, what was the actual point of this whole speech? Valerian's fists trembled. After a heavy dramatic pause, he spun around, literal tears pooling in his eyes. Diella was completely ghosting him. Derek deadpanned a dark aura, practically forming over his head. He totally thought this was a life-or-death crisis, not some petty sibling drama. Clutching his chest in pure agony, Valerian cried about how she used to greet him with the brightest smiles back in the day. Seriously, where else could you find such... Was there seriously no cheat code to win back her affection? Derek sighed, asking why he was getting dragged into this. Valerian shot back that Derek was literally the only guy Diella actively trailed after. Suddenly, Valerian whipped a stuffed doll out of his pocket, begging Derek to just look at his masterpiece first. He had apparently picked up sewing from the maids. Shoving this absolutely cursed nightmare-fuel doll into Derek's face, he asked eagerly, "Doesn't it look exactly like Diella? You can practically feel the big brotherly love radiating off it, right?" Derek didn't hold back. He bluntly told him it looked like a voodoo doll made to hex someone. That brutal honesty shattered Valerian's soul even more. leaving him wailing about how utterly hopeless he was at this stuff. A few days drifted by, and then boom! The Count's wife, Mariella Dabble-Duplan, finally rolled into the estate. Her very first move, summoning Derek. Flashing a totally polite, rehearsed smile, she mentioned she'd heard the rumors. Apparently they had scoped out a seriously top-tier tutor for her precious daughter. She purred that it was an absolute pleasure to cross paths at last. And if it wasn't too much of a hassle, she wanted to ship a fancy gift from her own territory, straight to his noble family. Derek flatly corrected her. He wasn't tied to any noble bloodline. Mariella blinked, thrown off. But the second he dropped the bomb that he was a commoner, her fake smile instantly shattered into pure ice. Flashback to a week ago. Aseline had packed up to leave, but not before cornering Derek for a quick chat. She honestly felt totally relieved that they managed to pull him into the Grand Duke's orbit. As her big sister, she desperately wanted to stick around and watch over Diella. But duty called back in Ebelstein, so she was officially passing the torch to him. Derek gave a solid nod, saying he had it all under control, while Jaden clapped him on the shoulder with a Jaden totally called him out, teasing that for a guy entrusted with someone's little sister, his response lacked serious energy. The two of them hopped into the carriage. As a final sign-off, Jaden hollered at him to wrap this gig up fast and hurry back, because if Feline caught wind of this setup, she'd throw an absolute tantrum. Aseline flashed one last trusting smile, saying she was betting on him before the carriage rolled out. But the absolute second they hit the road, Aseline gasped. She totally blanked on the most crucial detail: her mom was coming back next week, and she completely... Jaden raised an eyebrow, asking if the guy actually needed a survival warning for that. She grimaced, admitting that her mom was putting it lightly, a literal goddess of pure rage. Cut back to the present. The instant Mariella found out her daughter's tutor was a nobody commoner, she kicked open the door. Furious, she demanded to know what kind of sick joke this was. Flustered, he desperately shushed her to keep the volume down. He wasn't deaf, okay? She fired back that his hearing wasn't the issue here. They were talking about Diella. Did he seriously forget that this was their precious, absolute favorite youngest child? He defensively shot back that he hated handing elite jobs to commoners just as much as she did. But literally every single top-tier tutor from a high-class family had thrown in the She glared daggers at him. How on earth could he hand their daughter over to some random kid roughing it in the mercenary world? He groaned, arguing that finding a decent magic tutor wasn't exactly a... Plus, Aseline herself had vouched for the guy. Mariella aggressively massaged her temples, snapping that they needed to have at least some basic standards. What about his younger brother, Flam? Sure, the dude claimed he was booked solid last time, but things had totally shifted now. Ella had finally sparked her own magic. If Flam just stepped in to train her, this entire mess would magically fix itself. Raymond stared at her like she was crazy. Did she really want to drag the guy running their entire estate out of his job just to play private tutor? Did she actually think the Ebelstein territory would stay afloat if they treated its management like an absolute joke? She snapped right back. What about high society, huh? Did he think the elite social circles just winged it? That world was a literal war zone, and their family's entire reputation was on the line. A private tutor makes all the difference, yet their precious daughter is stuck learning from some no-name peasant. Is he seriously trying to turn her into a total laughingstock for her high society debut? Valerian barged into the office, begging his mom to chill out. She didn't come here to pick a fight with his dad, right? But she just coldly told him to back off. They absolutely couldn't just sweep this under the rug, especially since they seriously doubted this random commoner even had the chops to mentor Diella. Raig strolled into the room, backing his mom up 100%. She flashed a proud smirk when she saw her son, and he pointed out that a low-born nobody tutoring a high-ranking noblewoman was a totally sketchy. Sure, if this guy actually had some legit skills to back up the hype, he guessed it wouldn't be the end of the world. Pivoting to face his dad, he straight up challenged this Derek dude to a magic duel to see what he was really made of. Raymond shut him down immediately, bluntly stating that Derek was an authentic mage, leaving Raig scowling as he brainstormed a backup plan. Smirking, he pitched a new idea. Then how about testing Diella? His brother shot him a nasty glare, but Raig just kept talking, arguing that if Derek was actually this god-tier mentor, then Diella should be flexing some seriously massive improvements by now. He volunteered to personally throw down with his sister to gauge her power, up a totally brutal idea that the Duke actually greenlit. Mission accomplished. Raig strutted out of the office, only for Valerian to chase him down, absolutely fuming and demanding to know what the hell was wrong with him. A magical duel. Seriously, Reg just whipped around, hitting him with a deadpan stare, asking if he actually bought into the whole Did he just magically forget all her toxic drama? Valerian fired back that she was still family, their literal flesh and blood, and they were supposed to have her back. Flashing a psycho grin, Reg completely snapped, screaming that this so-called flesh and blood was actively dragging their entire legacy through the mud. Like all her past screw-ups weren't bad enough already. If she crashed the high society debut looking like a total joke, their family's reputation would be cooked. Valerian stared in disbelief, asking if he actually meant that. But Reg doubled down coldly, stating that Diella was the one who crossed the line in the first place, and she belonged locked away in the annex. Valerian clutched his head in utter despair as he watched his brother storm off, realizing he was completely serious. Fast forward a bit. Diella slammed Derek's door open, prompting him to casually ask why she was wilding out this early in the morning. She aggressively slammed a scroll onto his desk, panic-dropping the bomb that, if she tanked this magical duel, his job was completely toast. He calmly unrolled the parchment, casually mentioning that he was already up to speed on the drama. He pointed out that young Master Reg was already a hardcore 1-star mage, making this a crazy difficult boss fight for her. She practically shrieked, asking if that was seriously his only reaction when his literal paycheck was on the line. Unfazed, he smoothly reminded her that he was just a mercenary, doing a gig cashing in on the exact job he was hired to pull off. Nothing more, nothing less. And honestly, he'd already bagged way more coin than he needed. Her heart sank, tearing up as she quietly asked, did he actually mean that cut to 1 week later, the arena was set, and the whole ducal squad rolled up to witness the bloodbath? Our boy Derek hit the Duke with a slick little bow, leaving the old man internally shook by how completely chill the guy looked. Was he really packing that much swagger? Holding it down with zero sweat in a high-stakes vibe like this just proved to the Duke that letting him go would be a massive mistake. This was definitely not going to be some basic sparring match. Derek posted up on the sidelines, while Reg swaggered right into the center ring, plotting to completely wreck Diella and make her regret every single life choice. Meanwhile, Diella was hyping herself up as she marched toward the battlefield, flashing back to that intense heart-to-heart with her teacher, where she confronted him about whether he really didn't give a damn as long as he secured the bag. He had clapped back, pointing out that she already knew her magical stats had massively leveled up. Sure, she wasn't quite ready to spam 1-star spells just yet, but unlocking that tier was right around the corner. After all, she was packing that top-tier Duplain DNA, choking back real tears. She demanded to know why he was suddenly hitting her with this deep talk. He just tilted his head, asking if he really never explained it to her. The School of the Wild was a brutal discipline, where hardcore solo grinding mattered way more than sitting back and getting spoon-fed lectures. Breaking down completely, she bawled and yelled at him, demanding to know why he was talking to her like he was about to bail. He stayed dead silent, letting her vent about how she knew she wasn't the best student. But she still desperately wanted to stick around and learn magic from him. She straight up refused to be dumped onto some other tutor. He just stood there quietly, completely deep in thought, before casually dropping that he had absolutely zero clue about the rules and etiquette of these snobby noble duels. He had never played by their soft rules, but he could absolutely teach her how to violently win a real street fight. She still wanted to win, didn't she? The traumatic memories hit her like a truck. The endless bullying for being a magicless dud, getting brutally rejected by every stuck-up tutor, and hearing the whole estate whisper about how such a massive failure could even belong to the legendary Duplain bloodline. She was nothing but a walking trash fire for their reputation. Why the hell were her siblings popping off like absolute prodigies, while the youngest was just a total dead weight? People pitied the Grand Duke, constantly gossiping about how lucky they were to have Lady Aislinn as a backup, because otherwise his own pathetic spawn would have literally sent him to an early grave. They even sneered that being childless would be way better than being cursed with a total flop like her. So fueled by pure desperation, Diella locked in and begged Derek to teach her how to fight. She stepped into the arena, totally shedding the shadow of being just Ray's little sister. And she definitely wasn't playing the fragile, youngest daughter of House Dupin today. Facing off against her own brother, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut, right until the butler cleared his throat to kick things off. He announced they were strictly going by the high-tier mage dueling rules from the elite Kelburn salon over in Ebelstein. The condition was simple: Whoever pops their Pelham General defensive magic circle first takes the instant loss. And just like that, the brawl commenced. Derek watched from the sidelines, knowing full well that this Pelham accessory automatically triggers a shield right before the user takes critical damage. It totally nullifies lethal spells. He scoffed internally, so this is how stuck-up nobles brawl, hiding behind ridiculously overpriced jewelry. All this just for a practice match. It must be wild having so much generational wealth that you can just burn cash on safety nets. The timer was set for 10 minutes, but by the dark look in Ray's eyes, he was dead set on wrapping this up in seconds. Ray wasted zero time, instantly chanting a high-speed wind spell. But while the mana gathered around him, Diella was already bracing for impact. As his spell locked on, he sent a silent mental apology to his sister. He just needed to force her back into her place at the outbuilding. With a sharp flick of his wrist, he launched a razor-sharp wind blade straight at her. Yet she didn't even flinch, staring death down with ice-cold confidence. At the absolute last second, she vaulted out of the way, making losing his cool, he unleashed a barrage of rapid-fire wind slashes. But she just kept sprinting, weaving through the deadly tempest. Observing her footwork, Derek realized she was manipulating one-star magic like a total pro. But her erratic movements screamed that she was a complete rookie in actual life-or-death combat. By zigzagging so wildly, she was blowing through her mana pool way too fast. Suddenly, she threw up a massive glacier wall to tank her brother's next heavy blast. Ray sneered, realizing she wasn't even casting proper star-rank spells. It was literally just raw, unrefined magic being dumped into a crude shield. Did she really think she could block his assault with a cheap parlor trick? Lifting his hand, he summoned 3 hyper-compressed wind spheres, ready to obliterate her defenses. If she wanted to play defense, he'd just completely shatter it with overwhelming firepower. Let's see her. Back then, he had drilled into her head that street-level mercenaries fight totally differently than snobby nobles. They don't give a single damn about honor or playing fair. Their one and only objective is surviving and securing the win. He warned her that fighting dirty in a formal duel might get her completely trashed by high society. He had asked if she was really okay with throwing away her prestige just to snatch a victorious ending. And her response, a thrilled, zero hesitation yes. Snapping back to reality, she darted out from the shattered ice wall, just as a stray wind blade sliced a millimeter past her cheek. Derek's voice echoed in her head out in the wild. There are monsters who always come out on top, even when completely outmatched in raw power. Those absolute menaces don't just stand there and trade spells. They wage actual war. And by war, he meant entirely hijacking the battlefield, weaponizing the terrain, and turning the environment into a death trap. They will literally exploit any filthy tactic to claim victory. You have to strike in that microsecond of a window, the exact moment the enemy blinks or gets too cocky. Channeling that energy, Diella kept ghosting around the arena, flawlessly evading her brother's relentless onslaught. As he fired off another heavy blast, she threw up a second ice barricade. But her heavy breathing gave it away. She was running on fumes. Ray smirked, barking that it was game over. Suddenly, a chilling presence spiked right behind her, forcing her to snap her head back. A blindside spell was hurtling right at her. A deafening explosion ripped through the arena, swallowing her in a massive cloud of debris. Derek stayed completely frosty, but Mariella, absolutely terrified, shrieked her daughter's name in pure panic, turning to the butler and screaming, "What are you doing? Shut this match down, right now. She's going to die out there." But Raymond coldly ordered his wife to take a seat, stating the match wasn't officially over. Hysterical, she yelled that he had watched. She was completely wiped out by that shockwave. But Raymond's eyes narrowed as he flat-out denied it. The golden glow of the Pelham defensive ring hadn't triggered. He shot a side-eye at Derek, realizing the mercenary hadn't even twitched, meaning he knew damn well how much of a beast his student had become. Meanwhile, down in the arena, Ray confidently strolled up to the smoking crater where his attack hit. He was dead certain that blast should have wiped her out. So why didn't the safety shield pop? More importantly, where the hell did she even go? Suddenly, a flash of her crimson cloak darted beneath the collapsed floorboards. In a split second, a jagged ice spike violently erupted from the ground, nearly impaling him. He scrambled back to a safe distance, completely dumbfounded. Was she seriously launching sneak attacks from inside the arena's crawl space? But wait, according to the prestigious Kelburn Salon rulebook, stepping off the platform is an instant disqualification. He shot a desperate look at the referee, Dylan, hoping for a foul call. But Dylan just shook his head, refusing to stop the fight. Ray gulped nervously, his anxiety spiking. Was this ref seriously ruling that hiding underneath the stage didn't count as going out of bounds? The truth hit him hard. The rules never accounted for this because no self-respecting noble would ever stoop to such a rat-like dirty tactic. Paranoia kicking in, he stared at his feet, just as another brutal ice pillar smashed through the wood right where he was standing, forcing him to dive out of the... But she had totally read him. Another icy trap was already waiting at his landing spot. He frantically dodged, sweating bullets. He couldn't even track Diella's movements, making it completely impossible to lock on to her. Then again he reminded himself he just needed one solid hit to pop her shield and win. But all that high society elegance was completely out the window now. Peeking down through the splintered floorboards, he froze, staring straight into the eyes of an absolute... It suddenly clicked. He'd seen that deadpan expression before. It was the exact same chilling look Derek shot their older brother, right before getting yanked by the collar. Taking a quick glance, he knew there was zero chance Diella cooked up this wild strategy herself. This setup had his mastermind energy all over it. Ripping off his cloak, he decided to humor their little scheme. Mariella gasped in horror, screaming that Diella had just dived under the stage, straight into a swirling dust storm. She whipped around, begging her husband to pull the plug on the duel right then and there. But he completely shut her down, pointing out that nobody had actually broken any rules yet. Plus, he was way too invested to stop watching now. Down below the arena floor, Diella crouched in the shadows, peering up with laser focus, tracking the invisible currents of magical energy. The split second he channeled a spell, she pinpointed his exact location and launched a brutal strike. He barely managed to dodge out of the way. That's when it hit him she was purposely targeting his legs the moment he started chanting. There was no way he was going out like a total scrub. Scrambling for an advantage, his eyes darted across the battlefield. A towering flagpole caught his eye, sparking a crazy idea. Meanwhile, Diella sensed the magical current completely vanish, a dead giveaway that he was plotting something sneaky. But it didn't matter. The next time he even breathed a spell, she was going to wreck him. Off to the side, Dylan tilted his head back, watching the young master scale the massive flagpole like a madman. He figured she wouldn't be able to track his energy from way up there. But sniping spells from that height was a total bust, leaving him with only one chaotic option: to obliterate the entire stage without using a single spell. Blasting a magic arrow straight into the base of the pole, he snapped the wood in half, riding the heavy timber as it plummeted toward the arena floor. Boom! The miller shattered the stage, cratering a huge hole through the floorboards, as Mariella shrieked her son's name in pure panic. Ray, however, had already safely touched down into the dark underbelly of the arena, scanning through the thick haze. He caught the faint outline of his sister sprinting through the dust cloud, and instantly fired off a homing magic arrow, catching the glowing threat from the corner of her eye. She threw her arms up to block, but her mana pool was completely dry. Panic flashed across her face as the glowing projectile closed in fast. By sheer luck, the blast zipped right past her ear, allowing her to keep darting frantically through the shadows. Ray smirked, knowing that in a close-quarters brawl, he held all the winning cards. One solid hit with an arrow, and it was game over. But out of nowhere, Diella materialized right in his face, leaping into the air and driving a brutal kick straight into his chest. The heavy impact completely knocked the wind out of his lungs. While he was gasping for breath, she scooped up a handful of grit and aggressively chucked it right into his eyes, before scrambling back up to the main stage. Coughing and blinded, he couldn't believe she was actually resorting to kicking and pocket sand. Scraping the absolute bottom of the barrel without a drop of mana left, she was fighting tooth and nail just to secure the win. Even knowing the odds were stacked against her, she was treating this duel like a fight to prove her ultimate worth. Respecting her hustle, he decided to stop holding back and go all out, stepping up as a true older brother. Up above, she stood her ground on the ruined platform. As he finally hoisted himself out of the pit, she brushed a hand against her bleeding forehead. Ignoring the crimson dripping down her face, the MC's past advice echoed in her mind. Treat spellcasting like your mana is the rich paint, and your willpower is the brush. You just have to sweep up those free-floating particles of energy to paint a vivid, solid masterpiece. That is the true essence of magic. Remembering how her eyes had sparkled when he first showed her, she now shut her eyes tight, channeling his exact words as raw energy tingled at her fingertips, mentally hyping herself up to start painting her masterpiece. This is real magic, Out of thin air, she manifested a deadly frost-bitten. Dylan's jaw practically hit the floor in shock, while Mariella broke down into absolute happy tears, frantically shaking her husband and crying that their daughter was finally wielding first-star magic. Ray narrowed his eyes, a serious scowl forming as he realized still that flashy upgrade didn't change a single damn thing, catching the killer intent in her fighting stance. He summoned a barrage of glowing magical arrows, fully confident he was still leaps and bounds ahead, first-star magic or not. He was going to blast her before she even got a chance to swing. With a fierce flick of her wrist, she launched the glacial spear straight at him, right as he unleashed his volley of arrows. Boom! The two explosive spells slammed into each other, triggering a massive, blinding shockwave. Up in the stands, their mother was clutching her heart. As the heavy smoke began to clear, the glowing emblem of Pelham's magic circle flickered through the debris, signaling that one of them had officially been knocked out. Cut to exactly 1 year ago, the imposing Duke was taking a casual stroll through his Dylan approached, giving him a quick heads-up about a mysterious letter that had just dropped at the mansion that morning, hinting at some high society gala. Waiting for his boss's orders, Dylan paused as the Duke subtly peeked through the doorway of his daughter's bedroom. Inside, Diella was just slumped in a chair, staring blankly at the wall, like a literal zombie, but snapped back to the present, and her eyes were absolutely burning with intense fire. Yet despite her insane glow-up in the arena, her defensive barrier had forcibly triggered a split second too early, causing her massive ice spear to completely whiff past her brother. The crushing weight of defeat hit her hard. Derek dropped his gaze in pity as she absolutely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Mariella was absolutely seething. She snapped at her husband. He brushed it off. What he really meant was that this supposed tutor had pulled the exact same trick teaching the Dupin family's heiress. Raymond totally tuned her out. His eyes were locked on his daughter, completely swept up in a flashback to his own glory days. Back when he was just a gritty soldier, he actually earned the insane privilege of meeting his lordship face to face. He had sworn his absolute loyalty back then, calling it the ultimate honor to bleed for him on the battlefield. The lord just firmly gripped his shoulder and admitted he had heard legendary stories about him from his old man. Back then, his own eyes burned with relentless ambition. But looking at his daughter right now, her fierce glare was on a whole other level. Diella gritted her teeth, desperately fighting to lock down her spiraling emotions. A swarm of frantic maids instantly rushed over, completely surrounding her and bombarding her with worried questions. Spotting her brutal gashes, they panicked, begging to treat her right away. But she just swatted them away and marched straight toward her brother. He awkwardly dodged eye contact while muttering some praise. She just hit him with a cold, silent nod and immediately walked out of the arena. The maids scrambled to trail behind her, begging to escort her back to her room, but she completely ghosted them. Instead, she made a beeline for Derek. She froze dead in her tracks in front of him, too terrified to speak. Then the dam broke. She started bawling all over again, choking out apologies for her massive failure. He just stared back with his signature ice-cold calmness. Then he softly reassured her. He told her taking an L is part of the grind, and she needed to channel that bitter frustration to level up, to forge herself into an absolute weapon. But his comforting words just made her shatter completely, crying even harder. The maids just stood there, totally clueless on how to calm her down. That's when Mariella rushed over, gasping in horror at what her daughter just went through. She cried about how agonizing this entire ordeal must have been for her. Wrapping her in a fierce protective hug, she whispered that the nightmare was over and urged her to go get healed up immediately. Nodding weakly, she let the maids whisk her away. Mariella aggressively wiped her tears, her sadness instantly morphing into pure rage as she stomped toward Derek. She spat at him, calling him She screamed, demanding if he even realized the absolute mess he had caused. Did he actually dare to teach her first star magic? Does he seriously think pulling that off makes him some genius mentor? Smack. She slapped him hard across the face, snarling that his cheap he had literally forced a highborn duke's daughter to use disgusting, degrading tactics. Smack. She struck him again, totally losing her mind. She shrieked that there is an elite world that street trash like him couldn't even comprehend. Sacred traditions and values that must be protected. You need to have at least a single drop of basic human dignity. Spotting the Duke striding their way, she instantly pivoted, yelling out to him. You saw that absolute train wreck too, right? That wasn't even a real magic duel. He taught our Diella something absolutely horrific. But instead of backing her up, Crack. He delivered a brutal slap straight to her face, catching her completely off guard. His voice was ice cold, as he asked if she even realized who was actually acting like absolute trash right now. She just stared at him, totally stunned and bewildered. "But why?" she stammered. "This guy is literally just a peasant." Raymond didn't deny it. He flat out agreed. Yes, he is a nobody commoner. But right now, he is the man teaching their bloodline. What kind of parent publicly humiliates their child's mentor like a savage? Raymond stepped right up to Derek, formally apologizing for his wife's insane outburst. He sighed, muttering that people just have toxic ways of showing parental love. Derek brushed it off like it was nothing, so the Duke motioned for him to head to the VIP lounge. They had some heavy off-the-record business to hash out. Watching this random street kid walk off with her husband left Mariella absolutely fuming. Once the heavy office doors clicked shut, Raymond leaned back and praised Derek for transforming Diella. As the lord of the domain, he declared it was time to cash in. He was ready to drop the ultimate reward on him, the absolute peak of what a commoner could ever dream of holding. "You're gunning for third-star magic, aren't you?" Derek smirked inwardly. The old man had hit the bullseye dead center. The Duke had completely read him like an open book, tailoring this bribe perfectly to his greed. But then again, this was a legendary fifth-star mage. And when a massive break like this lands in your lap, you don't hesitate. Derek looked him dead in the eye and admitted that was exactly what he was after. Raymond gave him props for teaching Diella first-star magic so well, but warned him that in the cutthroat shark tank of high society, that basic trick wouldn't keep her alive. Derek fired back, pointing out that the estate was literally packed with elite tutors ready to guide Lady Diella. Now that she had unlocked her core potential, her power scaling would be insanely fast. But Raymond cut him off. His daughter didn't just need some textbook instructor. She needed a true mentor. He then called Derek out, pointing out that for a lowly commoner, he was hiding an ambition so dangerously massive, it was basically illegal to even dream about. He knew exactly, especially to those stuck-up arrogant nobles, right? But Raymond confessed he was totally willing to look the other way, purely because it was him. Derek's mind raced. He had barely exchanged 2 words with the Grand Duke before today, and this guy had already figured out he was aiming way past the 3rd star. He was gunning for the 4th star and beyond. Realizing how easily he was read made the Duke deeply terrifying. Raymond then leaned in, stating that if Derek was actually dead set on this insane path, he couldn't just rot in this place forever. He already had 1 foot out the door, didn't he? He made that crystal clear, but Lord Raymond saw right through his ambitions. He insisted Derek stick around to mold Diella just a bit longer, and tossed out one hell of a bribe to seal the deal. 3rd star magic. The second he stepped out of that office, Derek made a beeline for the library. He snatched a heavy tome off the shelf and skimmed through the ancient pages, completely blown away. This thing was no joke. Most mages would literally sell their souls just for a glimpse of a 2nd star grimoire. Yet here he was casually holding 3rd star tier magic. Yeah, this was definitely worth sticking around for. But then Jaden's warning echoed in his mind. If Madame Feline ever caught wind of this, all hell was gonna break loose. Fast forward a bit. Diella strutted right up to Derek, practically glowing, as she bragged about officially hitting 1st star mage status. He shot her a dry look, pointing out that pulling off a 1st star spell exactly 1 time barely qualified her for the title. She beamed anyway, totally fishing for compliments, but all she got was absolute crickets. Pouting, she snapped, "Wait, is that it?" Her mentor wasn't even the slightest bit hyped about her massive glow-up. He just shrugged coldly, reminding her that he was letting out a massive sigh. She grumbled about how brutal the whole ordeal was. Derek simply smirked, noting she bounced back pretty fast over the last, especially since she had completely bawled her eyes out earlier. Her face flushed bright red as she instantly went on the defensive, stammering that it was just dust in her eyes. Plus, her dad totally should have given her a heads up. She legitimately thought Derek was getting booted from the estate. Snapping his book shut, he ignored the tantrum and told her to gear up for training. She was evolving at an insane pace, meaning she'd crush the rest of the 1st star spells in no time. Catching that rare compliment, she whipped around, grinning from ear to ear. "Wait, what did you just say? How am I doing?" Derek sighed and repeated that her progress was crazy fast. Sparking star magic right after her initial mana awakening wasn't exactly an everyday thing. She was absolutely over the moon. Bouncing on her heels, she eagerly asked what flashy move they were tackling first. Magic arrow seems super clutch, since you didn't even need an incantation. Or maybe that razor-sharp, windblade rag was flexing. That move was totally busted. But man, that ice spear was gorgeous too. If she just grinded a little harder, she could finally wipe that smug look off her brother's face. Derek totally killed the vibe, bluntly stating they were sticking to raw mana manifestation. Her jaw dropped. Weren't they diving into the cool, first-star attacks? He calmly explained the logic behind it. But long story short, fundamentals rule everything. No solid mana core, no flashy magic. She pouted, completely deflated, but didn't dare argue. Whatever he says goes. Seriously, why did she even get her hopes up? She was so ready to cast some real spells. Derek just stared at her in total silence until she nervously snapped, "What? Why are you looking at me like that? Do I have something on my face?" He chuckled, admitting it was just mind-blowing seeing her actually follow orders for once. She immediately whipped her head away, striking a proud pose. "Who do you think I am?" She swore she had respected him from day one. Derek completely destroyed her defense, casually reminding her about the time she dumped filthy mop water on his head. Not once, but twice. Instant regret washed over her face. "You're seriously still holding on to that," she mumbled. He deadpanned that taking a dirty bath wasn't exactly easy to forget. Sweating bullets, she desperately switched gears, forcing an awkward laugh, while pointing out how absolutely gorgeous the weather was today. "Mana manifestation sounds like a blast. Let's get to work right now." Watching her panic, a faint smile crossed his lips, and he finally kicked off the lesson. By the time they wrapped up, the moon was already glowing high in the night sky. Diella collapsed onto the damp grass, completely gasping for air. Derek casually dropped that he heard her schedule was about to get packed. Taking a seat beside her exhausted body, she glanced up. "Wait, did my dad already tell you?" Starting next week, she was being dragged into brutal etiquette and general ed classes. He raised an eyebrow. Isn't that a good thing? After all, she just conquered first-star magic. Now it was time for her to be molded into a proper aristocrat. She groaned, looking absolutely miserable. Ballroom dancing, foreign languages, geography, history, literal botany, piano, and sewing. What is the point of any of this? How on earth did Aseline survive this torture? Derek calmly pointed out that there was a reason her sister was crowned the Flower of Duplin and utterly dominated high society in Ebelstein. Diella whined, burying her face in her hands. All she wanted to do was blast spells. He reassured her nothing was stopping her. Lord Raymond personally backed him, giving them plenty of breathing room to train. But she bit her lip, highly doubting she'd have the free time anymore. Derek shot her a challenging look. "Who's going to stop us? Someone trying to kick me out?" A cynical smirk crept onto her face. Duh, obviously. Her dad might be driving the hype train, but her mother absolutely refused to let some random tutor roam free. He tilted his head. Why exactly did Madame Feline want him gone? Staring blankly at the stars, Diella mumbled that her mom was terrified, that Derek's rough mercenary habits would rub off on her, completely torching her noble elegance. Just watching their savage sparring sessions, there was zero high-class dignity to be found. Derek chewed on that for a second. The silence dragged out before he finally smirked. Well then, that's a piece of cake. Shutting the madam down was going to be way easier than he thought. All he had to do was strip away her only excuse. Diella shot up, suddenly hanging on to his every word. Morning broke, and Mariella paced the grand halls of the estate, absolutely dreading the situation. Her mind wouldn't stop flashing to her daughter, and that absolute savage mentoring her. She was already picturing the worst-case scenario. Her sweet girl morphing into some ruthless mercenary, snatching people off the streets and acting totally unhinged. Gripping her temples, she let out a heavy, exhausted sigh. Striding toward the doorway, she fumed. Seriously, what could that useless brute possibly teach her kid? Even if her husband had given him the green light, she was still the lady of this manor, period. She'd find a way to kick him to the curb. Stepping out into the sunlit courtyard, she instantly spotted her daughter. Her face lit up and she threw her arms wide open for a warm... Honestly, she didn't care if the staff thought she was babying her. She just adored the way her girl would sprint into her arms with that bright, goofy smile. Squeezing her eyes shut, she braced for impact. But crickets. Blinking her eyes open in pure confusion, she found her daughter executing a flawless, terrifyingly polite curtsy. "Did you sleep well last night, mother?" she asked smoothly. Mariella was completely thrown off guard, while Diella calmly continued. She explained she'd been stuck in the annex while recovering from her injuries, and felt absolutely terrible for missing out on quality mother-daughter time. She had a million things she wanted to catch up on, but sadly, she was booked for a morning piano lesson. Mariella, completely baffled by this new vibe, just nodded along. Her daughter gave another crisp bow, gracefully excusing herself because her academic schedule was just too packed. Mariella blurted out, "Wait, your etiquette classes haven't even started yet, right? Those are next week." Diella flashed a picture-perfect smile, looking exactly like Aseline, and nodded. She sweetly added that thanks to her mother's care, she was genuinely looking forward to the classes. Still deeply weirded out, Mariella just told her not to be late. Diella then elegantly strolled off. A nearby maid, witnessing this entire bizarre exchange, literally dropped her laundry basket, her jaw on the floor. Diella just smiled back, asking politely if the maid was hurt, and hoping she wasn't pushing herself too hard. The terrified maid just stared at her like she'd seen a ghost, matching everyone else's shock. Fast forward, and a group of high society girls were sipping tea in Ebelstein's elite district. One girl leaned over to Aseline, mentioning how stressed she'd been at their last hangout, since Aseline had looked incredibly down and anxious back then. Aseline blinked in surprise. "Really, I didn't mean to worry you guys." She then smoothly added that most of her drama was handled, so she was feeling completely fine now. Elente Alfioning, the second daughter of the Belmiard family, smiled and breathed a sigh of relief. She admitted that when she heard the wild rumors that Aseline sneaked out of the noble zone to rescue someone, she was absolutely terrified for her. Aseline gave a soft smile, thanking her for caring. Honestly, she explained, her little sister just desperately needed a magic tutor. She'd been completely swamped because she literally went headhunting for him herself. Elente was stunned. She went tracking a guy down personally. What does that even mean? How insanely overpowered is this guy's resume if the golden child of House Duplan went out of her way to recruit him? Meanwhile, the second daughter of House Feltius, Denise Lanier, chimed in, asking if she meant her notorious little sister Diella. Aseline nodded. Yes. Denise mentioned bumping into Diella at the manor recently, and the girl had completely transformed into a high-class lady. She barely recognized her. She even unlocked first-star magic, and acted so incredibly poised and mature that Denise herself felt motivated to level up her own manners. But internally, Denise found it super weird. Aseline was actually the one bringing up her sister. Wasn't the Duplin family trying to keep that menace out of the spotlight? Still, Denise smiled and agreed that Aseline must have scored a god-tier teacher. Aseline completely agreed. Sure, the guy had zero social standing, but his skills were undeniably off the charts. It was a massive win that she hit up the Beldrin mercenary guild to scout him out. The other two girls completely froze, totally lost when she casually dropped the word mercenary. Elente secretly connected the dots. Wait, wasn't Diella the whole reason their former chef went running from the Duplan estate? She clearly remembered the chef bawling tears of joy when he came back praising Elente's kindness. It was absolutely wild to think this new tutor didn't just fix this infamous brat's attitude, but actually forged her into a top-tier mage. Flashing an eager smile, she asked if she could get the guy's name. If he was the one mentoring Lady Diella, he was bound to blow up in the noble scene very soon, so she desperately wanted the inside scoop before everyone else. Aseline smirked proudly and dropped his name, Derek. Meanwhile, cutting back to the estate, Diella was chatting with her mom, casually dropping the bomb that Derek was actually the one giving her basic etiquette pointers. Figuring it out solo was just way too tough. Mariella forced a stiff, painful smile, choking out that it was super impressive. She was doing independent study. But Diella immediately corrected her. She wasn't self-taught at all. It was 100% Derek's guidance. Mariella's eye twitched as she asked what could possibly be so hard about just learning it herself. Flashing a bright smile, she admitted that while the whole process was a massive struggle, pulling this off was completely thanks to Derek. Mariella forced a stiff, irritated grin. The moment she stormed out of the room, her blood boiled. Literally every single word out of that girl's mouth was about him. Unable to mask her seething rage anymore, a twisted smirk crept onto her face. Seriously, how many times was his name going to get dropped? She had zero clue what kind of spell that guy cast on Diella, but there was no way in hell she was letting this slide. She needed a loophole, and fast. Desperate for dirt, She started interrogating the staff about her daughter's behavior. But the maid just gushed about how incredibly sweet the young miss had been acting lately. She was literally an angel now. Even the gardener chimed in, swearing she was always glowing with happiness. In just a matter of weeks, her entire vibe had flipped. Dylan found the whole glow-up mind-blowing, claiming he'd only ever witnessed that kind of elite grace from Aseline. Maybe the kid was finally stepping into her true noble era. She was radiating absolute boss energy now. Hearing this, Mariella was practically frothing at the mouth. She had absolutely zero leverage to get Derek fired. As night swallowed the sky, our boy hit the starlit meadow for his usual grind, ready to level up his magic. Slamming the grimoire open, he dropped to the dirt and started channeling his mana, letting the energy surge. He thrust his hand forward, jaw locked tight from letting out a heavy, frustrated breath. He collapsed backward onto the damp grass. But a sudden crunch of leaves behind him made him snap his head around. Reg tossed up a casual wave, looking a bit guilty. "My bad, did I wreck your flow?" Derek brushed it off, asking what brought the guy out to the middle of nowhere. Dropping down next to him, Reg admitted he originally came to vent about Diella, but something else totally caught his eye right now. "Hold up, is that a Tier 3 magic grimoire?" Derek gave a solid nod, mentioning that his lordship tossed it his way to study. Reg's jaw practically hit the floor. Our MC kept it humble, admitting the difficulty was way out of his league right now, but getting a sneak peek at the theory couldn't hurt. Reg suddenly flashed back to his dad, hyping Derek up as an absolute prodigy, murmuring in total disbelief that the kid's hustle was actually insane. Shifting gears, Derek asked what the deal was regarding Lady Diella. Reg immediately broke eye contact, rubbing the back of his neck awkwardly. "Man, it's kinda messy. Like honestly, what are teenage girls even into right now?" Derek just stared at him, letting the silence hang. Reg nervously pitched the idea of crafting a custom doll for her, instantly getting war flashbacks to Valerian's creepy handmade toy. Chuckling nervously, Reg immediately backpedaled. "Yeah, figured. Not that I was actually gonna make one or anything. Definitely a trash idea." The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife, so Reg hopped to his feet, suggesting they head back if the training session was a wrap. Trudging back to the massive estate, Reg dropped his guard and genuinely thanked him. The vibes inside the mansion had been absolutely immaculate lately. Even Valerian was actually locking in on his territorial duties, and the old man, despite his resting stone face, was clearly hyped about the changes. Derek dryly pointed out that reading his lordship's emotions was like cracking a secret code. Reg burst out laughing, totally agreeing that the entire Stopping in his tracks, Reg gazed up at the night sky, whispering that maybe it was time he finally accepted that people can actually evolve, especially kids growing up. He honestly couldn't tell if he'd been completely blind to it, or if he was just dodging reality. But seeing Diella totally reinvent herself made him realize he needed to step up too. He shot Derek a warm smile, admitting he owed this massive wake-up call. Our guy just gave a quiet, humble nod. Swishing his hands through the air, Reg tried mimicking his little sister's spellcasting, pointing out that her magical aura felt completely different now. Smirking slightly, Derek asked if he'd finally caught on to the secret. Reg nodded, comparing her flowing technique to an artist painting a masterpiece. In his head, Reg was just blown away by the kid's raw talent. A genius truly is a genius. Spotting that kind of micro detail in mana flow had to be crazy hard. Derek explained that Diella was straight up tapping into the wildlife school of mana control. Reg's eyes lit up, mentioning he'd caught rumors about that rare style. Our MC kept breaking it down, explaining that every single mage's mana signature hits totally differently. The moment she locks into her own natural rhythm, she'll basically put herself on autopilot and won't need his help anymore. Honestly, at her current level, a tutor stepping in would just throttle her potential. Reg agreed, knowing it was only a matter of time before she totally stole the spotlight. Flash forward 2 whole months. Morning sunlight flooded the room as Diella hyped herself up for another class. While the maid was twisting her hair into a gorgeous braid, she spotted. Beaming, the young miss replied that they had just popped open, looking absolutely flawless. So she snagged them to totally accessorize her hairstyle. Rocking a massive smile, she whispered that the fragrance was simply divine. Honestly, it felt like she'd been living in an endless perfect spring for months. She was literally spamming Tier 1 magic with zero effort now, and she'd even built an incredibly tight bond with the entire mansion staff. Looking back, she realized she'd been missing out on so much of life, and every bit of this new happiness traced right back to Derek. Teasingly, the maid chuckled, mentioning she was wondering why her lady was glowing so hard today. "Let me guess. It's magic lesson day, isn't it?" She enthusiastically nodded, blushing, as she asked if she really looked that excited. The maid just grinned and promised to weave the flowers into an absolute masterpiece, while Diella specifically asked to save one single blossom to gift to Derek. But the second she stepped into his room, buzzing for another session, a massive reality check smacked her right in the face. Tears immediately pooling in her eyes, her voice cracked as she begged him to explain. Staring coldly, he told her she heard him loud and he was completely done with her training. There wasn't a single thing left for him to teach. That was just like a bone-chilling winter always breaks even the most picture-perfect spring, has an expiration date. Stepping straight into Raymond's office, our guy dropped a massive bombshell, warning him that his grace was absolutely catching on to their little secret. But here is the kicker. Lady Diella hailed straight from the school of savagery, and even surrounded by absolute monsters, her ruthless energy was completely off the charts. Trying to control her any further would just end up clipping her wings. Raymond nodded, admitting he fully understood the situation, and because of that, there was absolutely zero reason for the guy to stick around the estate. Derek confirmed that he hit the nail on the head. Suddenly the Lord fell dead quiet and shot up from his chair. Giving a deep bow, he confessed that thanks to the young man, so much had shifted, and his little girl had actually been able to grow and mature. He admitted he was so buried in running the territory that he totally failed as a dad, but now a massive weight was finally off his shoulders. Looking up with a quiet gaze, he asked when Derek planned to head out. The mage explained he got word that Lady Aseline was swinging by the estate soon before heading straight back to Ebelstein. He figured he would just hitch a ride in her carriage. Raymond nodded in understanding, but then immediately demanded his library key back. Derek promised he would drop off the magic grimoires he was currently diving into and hand the key over to the head butler later. But Raymond shook his head, insisting there was no need for all that. He wanted the key handed over right this second. Derek froze for a second before Raymond casually added that if they were done here, he was free to bounce. The main character just stared blankly at the floor, then abruptly stood up, gave a quick bow, and dipped out of the office. While strolling down the grand corridor, he bumped straight into Diella. She scoffed, pointing out that he literally popped up out of thin air, and now he was vanishing back into the void just as fast. Calling her by her name, he sighed, admitting that it was totally out of his hands. Hiding her hands behind her back, Diella mumbled that she knew he would probably ignore her, but she had to get this off her chest anyway. Blushing super hard, she quietly pleaded one last time. Could he please just stay? Derek just stared at her in dead silence, then closed the distance between them, explaining that, like always, he was going back to his gritty mercenary lifestyle while grinding his magic skills. But he promised that once Lady Diella leveled up her own abilities, she would head straight out to Ebelstein for her grand society debut. Diella completely dropped her gaze, looking super heartbroken. Derek softened, adding that they could definitely cross paths again then. Plus, if he manages to rank, he would be able to teach her some sick new spells by then. Pouting Diella snapped that he was just so annoying he always knew exactly what to say, leaving her totally speechless and unable to clap back. Fast forward a bit, night rolled in, and Diella finally drifted off. But she was dragged into a brutally dark nightmare, where shadowy figures crowded around her, spitting pure venom, calling her a worthless kid who could not do a single thing right. They mocked her, asking what she even had going for her, besides her fancy bloodline. Zero talent, just a walking embarrassment to the entire Duplin family name. Trash like her should not even exist. Right at that peak of horror, her eyes snapped wide open, and she started gasping for air like crazy. Still totally panicked from the nightmare, she screamed out no, desperately trying to ground herself back in reality. Clutching her head, it finally clicked that it was all just a messed up dream. And right on cue, a maid threw the door open, frantically asking if everything was okay. She heard screaming. Was she hurt? Diella locked eyes with the servant, and a dark thought crossed her mind. Could she spin this into a massive... What if she slapped the girl again through a massive tantrum and just caused absolute chaos? Then Derek would be forced to stay for her, right? The maid crept a little closer, checking in again, asking if she was feeling sick. Diella bit her lip tight, then shook her head. No. Finally realizing she was completely done acting like a toxic brat. She gently reassured the maid that everything was totally fine and told her to not worry. Diella knew that kind of petty drama would not make her a better person, so she shoved those intrusive thoughts far away. When morning finally hit, Aseline hopped into the carriage and asked Derek if he was cool with getting dropped off right near the shopping district. The young mage nodded, saying that would actually be a huge lifesaver. Aseline gave a warm smile, nudging him to go say his final goodbyes, since they were rolling out soon. Derek turned around and caught sight of his whole crew, all gathered there to send him off. Valerian strolled up with a massive grin, teasingly asking if he was actually ditching them. Derek shot back, saying it was high time he headed back to his own turf. Rig chimed in too, pointing out that surviving the high society mansion life must have been insane, and giving him mad props for hustling so hard all this time. Valerian clapped him on the shoulder, making it clear that if things ever went south, he should definitely hit him up immediately, promising he would always have his back. Looking at his buddies, Derek gave a genuine thanks, before shifting his gaze quietly to Diella, who was just staring intensely back at him. It was incredibly obvious she was fuming mad, and Derek just kept his eyes locked on her. Finally cracking, she snapped, "What was up with that look? Did he really expect her to throw a fit and beg him to stay? He better not get things completely twisted. She was not some clingy little kid anymore." Derek just let out a sob and told her it was an absolute honor to be her mentor, even though he did not quite feel worthy enough to proudly claim the title of her master. He really hoped she would never forget the spells they worked on together. A warm smile broke across Diella's face as she softly apologized, promising she would always flex that he was her teacher. He knew his peaceful low-key days were officially over. Right after all, he was now the legendary master of the great Diella. He gazed at her in total silence, and right in that split second, Diella's eyes completely welled up with tears. Choking back her emotion, she ordered him to stay safe, and told him to stop doing stupidly reckless things, and absolutely stay out of trouble. Dropping those heavy words, she spun around in a flash, completely hiding her face. To save her from blushing any harder, he smoothly assured her he'd be completely fine, gently warning her not to push her own limits either. Diella immediately frowned, stubbornly snapping back that she was a full-grown adult, perfectly capable of handling her own business. Right then, a vivid childhood memory flashed through his mind. Katya wrapping him in a tight hug, making him promise to never forget her word. He went totally quiet for a second, before suddenly turning back, gently patting her head, and softly telling her there was no need to rush growing up. Hearing that totally broke her down. Her eyes instantly welled up, forcing her to look away as she frantically wiped away the tears. As Derek finally stepped up into the carriage, a sudden shout echoed out. Diella was screaming his name at the top of her lungs, promising they would definitely cross paths. Giving her a deeply respectful bow, he shot back that he would see her in Ebelstein. Lady Diella. Completely failing to hold back her sobbing, she just choked out a quiet, "Okay." Fast forward to the gritty Ebelstein shopping district. A brutal beatdown was happening right on the pavement. Suddenly, Derek stepped into the chaotic scene. He took in the absolute bloodbath unfolding right in front of him. Spotting him through the mess, the fierce mercenary feline instantly screamed out his name in pure shock. A smirk crossed his face. He was officially back in his element. A little while later, our guy was kicking back inside the rowdy Belden Tears Tavern alongside Feline. Jaden slid a glass over, joking that it was the bougie honey wine. He offered it as a totally free welcome back shot. Derek nodded his thanks, but Feline immediately leaned in with a burning question. Had he seriously always been this ghostly pale? Or did living that cushy high society life totally wash him out? Derek just shot her a weird look, prompting Feline to keep roasting him. She joked that when she heard he actually became a magic tutor, she assumed the royals had absolutely lost their mind. She demanded the full tea on what actually went down. Shrugging it off, Derek deadpanned that he literally just clocked in. Feline's jaw dropped, complaining that he sounded exactly like a snobby aristocrat. Would it absolutely kill him to drop some lore? Jaden cut in, telling her to chill out and just drink her booze, but Feline threw a massive fit, admitting the whole thing was low-key triggering her. Why? Because she had been suffering through absolute hell doing solo runs, while he was off playing tutor. Trying to switch gears, Jaden pointed out that Derek must— Did the royals actually pay up? Unbothered. Derek replied that he snagged something way more valuable than just coins. Jaden hit him with a super confused stare. Meanwhile, Derek just locked eyes with a mysterious, ancient-looking book. Leaning closer, Jaden demanded to know what he was holding. Was that seriously a— Feline gasped, pointing out how insanely rare those were. but Derek totally shut them down, casually revealing it was actually a level 3 spellbook. Jaden practically leaped out of his chair screaming if he had swiped the thing. If the guards caught him with that, his life was completely over. But Feline did not care about the law at all. She was hyped that it was a literal grimoire, and immediately demanded to know where the stash was, so she could loot one too. Staring completely blankly at the two of them, our guy dropped the ultimate flex. The Grand Duke personally gifted it to him. Feline instantly lost her mind. What? She called him a filthy little liar, then immediately switched up, desperately begging to know if the royal estate was hiring any archery instructors. She ruthlessly shook him for answers. Once the chaos finally settled down, Derek got down to business, asking if they had any fresh bounties lined up. Blown away, Jaden asked if he was seriously trying to grind quests the literal second he got back. He explained he wanted a super easy cleanup gig, just because he felt like his combat mechanics had gotten a bit rusty. Jaden burst out laughing, totally calling his bluff, as if a prodigy like him could ever lose his edge. Plus, the mercenary game was constantly starving for decent mages. If he was really itching to jump back into the meat grinder, the request board was absolutely stacked with jobs. Derek locked it in, declaring he wanted to deploy the very next morning. Cut to daybreak, and he was already bumping along in a rugged carriage alongside Feline. The battlefield was pure chaos. A massive, terrifying ogre ruthlessly locked onto Feline. But once the duo obliterated the beast, they instantly They spent the entire day grinding through the bloodbath. Come nightfall, they crashed hard in the pitch-black woods, catching sleep on the dirt, right next to a crackling campfire. But under the cover of darkness, Derek quietly got up to relentlessly grind his magic skills. Concentrating hard, he formed a glowing raw magic crystal right in the palm of his hand. Out of nowhere, the unstable energy violently launched forward, setting off a deafening explosion. The shock wave threw him straight into the dirt, leaving him desperately gasping for air. Lying there, he realized that while he had completely maxed out his second-tier spells, the massive skill gap to hit that third star was proving to be an absolute nightmare. Time flew by in a blur of endless grinding summer, bled into autumn, then froze into winter. Shivering in the brutal cold, the crew pushed open the heavy doors to their favorite. Shaking off the snow, Feline loudly complained about the freezing weather, wondering if the universe was seriously trying to freeze them to death. Jaden threw them a warm greeting, joking that only insane young people would hike up frozen mountains in this weather. Sneezing violently, Feline groaned that she literally begged to wait for a warm front. Laughing it off, Jaden admitted that dragging a severed harpy's head through a literal blizzard was a stunt only total lunatics like them could actually pull off. Casually wiping fresh monster blood off his cheek, Derek just smirked and thanked him for the compliment. Meanwhile, Feline was still totally processing the fact that she had even survived the raid. Seeing how absolutely drained they were, Jaden figured they definitely earned a rest day tomorrow. However, he slyly mentioned that a shiny new bounty. Instantly intrigued, our main guy demanded the details. Leaning over the counter, Jaden promised it offered a massive payout for practically zero effort, even if the target itself was a huge pain in the neck. The gig dropped straight from the Rohall mercenaries, down on West Street. The client some big shot named Count Belmiard. The job description was brutally simple. They needed a live target for magical sparring. Basically, a human punching bag. Show up, tank a few hits, and collect the bag. Cut to Derek standing dead center in a high-end magical arena tucked away in the Noble District. Two figures rolled up on him. The bratty girl scoffed, demanding to know who she was supposed to duel today. Her handler smoothly replied they had scored a random commoner for her target practice. Elenti's jaw dropped. Seriously. She was supposed to waste her time wiping the floor with a peasant. The handler sighed, reminding her this was crucial for her combat training. Plus, they had tossed the guy a fat stack of cash, meaning she could go absolute goblin mode on him. She smirked. Duh, obviously. Classic rich kid behavior. Paying top dollar just to beat a working-class kid half to death for practice. Her instructor piped up, noting the boy actually held first-star magic. Elenti just rolled her eyes. Teach, I am literally about to hit 2 stars. You know that, right? The power gap between a 1-star and a 2-star is literally night and day. Meanwhile, Derek casually stretched out, getting into the zone, when footsteps clicked up behind him. It was Elenti, sizing him up and down. So, you are the punching bag today. He flatly dropped his name and gave a stiff, obligatory. Elenti introduced herself, though her name already rang a bell in his head. The instructor clapped his hands. All right, enough chatting. Take your spots in the arena. Alenti squinted at Derek. Sure, he had the aura of a mage, but he looked like an absolute rookie. She popped her knuckles, strutting right up to his face. So, she sneered, do you even know the basic rules of a magic duel, peasant? Derek deadpanned that he knew enough. Alenti smirked. Cute. All right then. Fight for your life. I will try to wrap this up fast. She fully planned to go hard on him, figuring one solid shockwave would blast him straight out of the ring, ending the whole charade in 5 seconds flat. Derek did not even flinch. Fight for my life. Exactly how much pushback are you expecting here? She scoffed. What kind of dumb question is that? Derek kept his icy gaze. I am on the clock. I just need to know how hard I have to try to actually help you. The instructor narrowed his eyes. Alenti let out a mocking laugh. Wow, you are hilarious. But like I said, give it 100%. He stared through her with zero emotion. Whatever, your funeral. The air crackled. Both flared their mana-locking eyes from across the dirt. Alenti instantly started chanting, thrusting her palm straight at his chest. In her head, she gave the street rat props for hitting 1 star this early, but his ego was way out of line. Time for a harsh reality check on the food chain. Alenti muttered an advanced incantation, launching a brutal shockwave right at his skull, but Derek just sidestepped, a casual zero-effort dodge, brushing it off like a gentle breeze. Her cocky grin evaporated into pure shock. Derek stood there completely unbothered. Is that it? What is next? That triggered her. Okay, maybe he was not completely useless, but there was still a massive skill gap between them. She rapidly chanted again. The ground trembled as razor-sharp mana arrows burst from the earth. Alenti rushed him, fully expecting him to panic under the deadly barrage. Instead, Derek flicked his wrist, activating a simple magic stone. Boom! A single pulse shattered every last arrow into glowing dust. Alenti was completely gagged. That was a bottom-tier spell, yet his mana control was absolutely insane. Watching from the sidelines, the instructor's jaw tightened. For a random his combat senses were undeniably elite. Suddenly, his background as a hardened mercenary was not sounding like a flex anymore. Alenti scowled, biting her lip. Fine. She had slept on him. Playtime was officially over. A dark, heavy aura radiated from her as she began a high-tier chant. Derek's eyes narrowed. A tactical shift. She was not just aiming for him anymore. She was prepping an area of effect nuke to wipe the entire arena block. For a spoiled rich kid, her battle IQ was actually pretty cracked. She threw her hands up, summoning a swarm of blistering fire arrows. The flaming projectiles spiraled toward Derek at breakneck speed. Dodging was off the table. He instantly slammed down a mana shield, absorbing the heavy impacts. Kaboom! A massive explosion ripped through the arena, kicking up a thick smokescreen of dust. Derek peered through the haze, and his eyes went wide. She was already airborne, hurtling right at him. A massive, jagged ice spear materialized in her hand. At point-blank range, it was a guaranteed kill shot. 0 time to dodge. 0 time to cast a shield. Her raw talent was genuinely terrifying. But right before impact, Derek pulled the ultimate bait-and-switch. Flash. She shrieked, stumbling blind. Where the hell did this rat go? Fighting the panic, she hyper-focused her hearing. If she could just catch a single footstep, she could flick a counterattack. Suddenly, a blinding streak cut right past her peripheral. He had literally speed blitzed her. Absolute silence, not a single sound. And before she could even breathe, Derek slammed his spell directly into her chest. And then it hit her, a sound-absorbing spell. The guy had literally read her mind, knowing she'd rely completely on her ears. That was exactly why her very first strike hit dead air. But he wasn't backing down. Derek kept pressing the offensive, forcing Alenti to mentally scream, "No freaking way." She yanked her arm back in a panic, but every muscle in her body locked up as Derek warped right into her personal space. He was bridging the gap insanely fast. Sure, slinging spells was her bread and butter, so she had to lock in. If that glowing mana fully formed in his palm first, she was totally screwed. But Derek slammed the brakes right in her face. Her jaw dropped as blinding magical sparks crackled beneath his boots. Raw energy flared from his fingertips, catching her completely off guard. Desperate to block the hit, she threw her arms up and stumbled hard onto the dirt. The instructor watched the whole spectacle in pure shock, secretly blown away by Derek's totally savage fighting style. The guy's moves were entirely unpredictable. Based on the Academy's strict rulebook, a raw combat flow like that was almost impossible to counter. Alente just scratched her head, totally bewildered. "This guy is seriously something else," she muttered. She had to admit she totally wrote him off at first, assuming he was just another arrogant fraud. Stepping right up to him, she gave a respectful bow, and admitted he'd just given her one hell of a show, thanking him for the lesson. But right on cue, she smashed the dirt with a blinding flash of mana, and launched herself straight at Derek. But the dude was already locked in, violently sweeping his right arm to the side. Alente was blinded by that intense glow once more, frantically trying to dodge, when Derek suddenly launched himself into the air, locking eyes with her from above. Pure terror gripped her, and she let out a piercing scream. Just in the nick of time, the instructor furiously rang the bell, instantly halting the spar. Derek touched down smoothly and gave her a polite nod, thanking her for the match. Alente just stared back, looking completely mortified and entirely speechless. A little while later, settling down at a cafe table, she finally broke the silence, calling him an absolute powerhouse of a mage. Derek just brushed it off, asking what she was talking about. Her reflexes were insane, the kind he'd seriously never seen before. She fired back that with smooth-talking skills like that, he was definitely built for high society. Sure, the rumors painted him as a lowly commoner, but seeing him in action, the guy had clearly grinded like crazy to get that strong. Derek simply shrugged it off, claiming a mercenary had to adapt just to stay alive. Alente rolled her eyes, telling him to drop the humble act, since she actually respected the hustle. But she warned him that the cranky old magic professor standing nearby definitely wouldn't be a fan. So he'd better not poke the bear without a good reason. Anyway, she gave him a genuine thanks for the epic lesson. She mentioned an upcoming formal tournament going down at the Fancy Rose Salon. She was really hoping to clutch a solid win this time around. Derek smirked, assuring her that with raw talent like hers, she had zero things to stress over. Alente sighed, admitting that might be true, but she couldn't care less about basic matches. The only person she was dying to crush was Aseline. Derek instantly went dead silent at that name. Catching the vibe, Alente awkwardly laughed, saying she was totally rambling, and let him leave. With a quick bow, he dipped out. As she casually sipped her tea, Alente started connecting the dots. Derek, from the mercenary squad. She knew that name from somewhere. It hit her like a truck. Aseline used to talk about him. The second the realization kicked in, she froze solid. Sprinting after him, she grabbed his wrist and locked onto his eyes. Derek shot her a confused frown as she blurted out, "Wait, aren't you the exact same mercenary who trained Aseline?" Fast forward to later that evening, as the guys got a warm fire crackling in the hearth. Alente cut right to the chase. She was straight up willing to do whatever it takes just to finally beat Aseline. Derek raised an eyebrow, asking if she really wanted to take her down that badly. Alente nodded firmly, admitting she was still stuck below the second star mage rank, and she was desperate to hit that milestone before her rival did. But even if she failed at that, she just wanted one clean victory over her in a head-to-head magic showdown. Derek chuckled, calling her wildly competitive. Alente scoffed bitterly. Competitive spirit, that's a cute way to put it. Sure, people might call it a rivalry now, but back in the day she was so obsessed with beating her that she would have easily played dirty just to win. Jealousy is such a toxic, pathetic feeling, she confessed. Her envy was eating her alive, bringing out her absolute worst. But no matter how much trash she talked or how hard she tried to drag her down, Aseline never fought back. She only ever tried to understand and embrace her. Derek asked why she was spilling all this trauma to him. Setting her mug down, she explained she needed him to see she was 100% serious, even if it meant exposing her ugliest flaws, because she had a massive favor to ask. He told her to go ahead and shoot, and Alente leaned in. Since he was living at the Dupan estate, he had to know exactly how insanely overpowered Aseline really was, and what kind of crazy magic she was packing. "So tell me," she begged, "what exactly do I need to do to crush her?" Derek met her intense gaze with a heavy silence, before finally admitting that Lady Aseline's raw talent was genuinely off the charts. But she was already packing some insane talent, so she pushed herself to the absolute limit. You know, sometimes a single glance spills every dark secret buried in someone's soul. And the girl standing right there wasn't just fishing for cheap comp. She was drowning in pure desperation, so starved for a breakthrough that she'd actually beg a bottom-tier mercenary for the cheat code. As they kept talking, Derek suddenly dropped a bomb. There's literally zero chance you beat her. Alenti locked eyes with him, letting a heavy, suffocating silence stretch out. Then her confident mask cracked into pure sorrow. She whispered that her soul craved this victory. She had to win. Snapping back, she demanded answers, pointing out he actually carried that useless Diella into becoming a real mage. So that obviously meant he could carry her to victory against Aseline Wright. He just stared her down before murmuring that sure, there were some crazy methods they could try. But before he could unpack all his red flags, she slammed back into her seat, brushing it off as a completely different issue. What red flags? Derek bluntly stated that for starters, she knew damn well how unhinged his training. Flashes of that brutal past crossed his mind, but Alenti just waved it off, claiming she didn't know the gory details. But he needed to chill, because she'd literally sacrifice anything for the win. Derek scowled instantly, hitting her with his second point, like she already knew he was just a hired gun. Meaning, but before he could even finish his thought, Alenti snapped back, asking if that was seriously his big concern. Was he really stressing over some pathetic gossip? Scared the high society snobs would roast a noble for taking lessons from a grunt. He needed to shut up and listen, because she was dead serious. She was destined to be a total legend, her name echoing through every corner of the empire. If she couldn't even dominate Ebelstein's elite circles, she'd be an absolute joke. So he better not question her drive over some lame class rules. She knew perfectly well that winning mattered way more than her ego. Derek just went, nah. He straight up told her if they're doing this, she's gonna have to cough up some serious cash. Her jaw hit the floor, stunned, before her cheeks flared crimson as it finally clicked. Oh, that's what you meant. Obviously, she'd throw down whatever bag he asked for. Seeing her fierce determination, Derek realized he had to match her freak and break out the absolute most brutal tactics. Fast forward a bit. Aseline casually announced an upcoming magic showdown at the next gathering. Spilling the tea that Lady Alenti had leveled up big time, she claimed she really needed to grind her own training too. Her squad buzzed with hype about the showdown, swearing they wouldn't miss it for the world. Right on cue, Alenti strutted over with a sly smirk. Lady Aseline playing humble as always. Aseline blinked in shock, realizing Alenti had actually crashed their circle. Aseline mentioned they were literally just talking about her, and Alenti shot back that she already knew, since her voice was practically echoing down the halls. The mean girls instantly backed off, letting Alenti press the attack. Do you really need to prep? You haven't taken a single L lately. Everyone's crowning you the flawless flower of House Duplan. Aseline politely took the compliment with a sweet smile, and smoothly added that as rivals slacking off just wasn't an option. You know, Alenti fired back, casually dropping that she just bagged a brand new coat, so her confidence was absolutely through the roof right now. He might just be some street rat, but his skills were godly, so she put him on the payroll. Aseline gasped, "Oh my god, if you're hyping him up this much, you must trust him with your life." Alenti let out a dark little laugh, correcting her to keep it real. It wasn't. Aseline's smile faltered, asking what on earth that meant. Alenti delivered the final blow. "My mentor's name is Derek." Instantly, Aseline looked like she just saw a ghost. Her perfect face twisted into utter chaos, while Alenti was mentally doing victory laps. Just look at that absolute panic in her eyes. She was spiraling, completely triggered, right? Alenti had successfully snatched the one thing Aseline couldn't lock down. Aseline mumbled a breathless, "Oh my god," before weirdly pivoting to congratulate her, admitting she already knew he was a ridiculously solid guy. Someone you could totally lean on, pouring out genuine praise. Aseline shyly reached out and squeezed Alenti's hand. Alenti threw out an awkward thanks, totally thrown off by this glitch in the Matrix. Meanwhile, Aseline flashed back to her own past. She remembered begging Diella to let Derek train her too, complaining that her magic glow-up had hit a major wall. She truly believed he was the key to maxing out her stats, but Diella had panicked, frantically waving her hands and shutting it down, claiming that unless it was a matter of life and death, she absolutely shouldn't risk it, because she cared about her way too much. Aseline snapped back to reality, while Alenti internally celebrated her big brain move. Watching her, Alenti finally grasped exactly how much this stung her rival. Derek was hers now. Let Aseline seethe and rage all she wanted, because that man officially belonged to her. Derek was Alenti's mentor. Suddenly Aseline leaned in and whispered, "Lady Alenti, Derek always gave me some weird vibes, but before she could drop the rest of the tea, Alente suddenly blinked, totally caught off guard. "Whoa, is it really that late already?" she blurted out. Their chat had been such a vibe, but today was literally her first day of classes, and she had to bounce. Before dipping, she hit Aseline with a super petty mocking goodbye, smirking as she dropped a sarcastic, "Hope nothing bad happens to you since Derek's such a saint." As they finally parted ways, they strolled right past Denise, who was just chilling outside at a table sipping her tea. Denise clocked them and realized they were grinding hard, too. A bit later, the scene shifted to the local tavern. Derek rolled up on Jaden, breaking the news that this was just how the cookie crumbled for now. His game plan. Going all in. The Belmiard house, huh? Man, his workload was just ballooning out of control. Derek casually pointed out how clutch it was that he didn't have to drag himself all the way to their estate, as long as he could pull it off right here in Ebelstein. Jaden scoffed. "Yeah, easier said than done, bro. Is beating Lady Aseline in a duel even physically possible?" Derek didn't flinch. "I mean, it's not totally 0%, he shot back. But if Lady Alante actually hits that second star rank, I don't care how cracked her talent is. That star gap is going to absolutely crush her." Jaden cut him off, waving a hand. "Look, I've heard enough of your yapping. Just tell me straight up, do we actually have a legit shot?" Derek deadpanned, "That legit shot is exactly why I need your help, man." Jaden instantly stiffened up at the heavy request, and Derek piled it on, dropping that feline desperately needed him for backup too. Jaden just stared at him stone cold before finally asking, "You're plotting something insanely dangerous and totally unhinged, aren't you?" Derek just smirked. "Reality is dangerous, my guy." Right on cue, Feline started bawling, tears streaming down her face as she shrieked, "You're damn right it's dangerous. Those scumbags played me. I walked right into their trap like a total idiot." The guys slowly turned to look at her melting down, and Jaden sighed. "All right, fine, just take her with you." Fast forward a bit, and Derek was standing dead center in the arena with Alante. First things first, dual prep 101. They were going to run 10 grueling reps before even touching the heavy-duty magic. Alante actually laughed out loud. "Wait, you seriously want me to run 10 back-to-back duels? No breaks before or after?" He completely ignored her sass, bluntly stating he needed to test her real combat chops first. She rolled her eyes, noting he looked way too hyped for a former merc. "Whatever, bring it on," she challenged. "I didn't hire you to bore me with history lectures anyway." Derek's eyes narrowed. "All right then, let's go." Boom. In an instant, the arena was practically trashed. Alente was gasping for air, clutching her knees, as Derek casually gave her props for the effort. "Good job. Now take a 10-minute breather, then we're drilling basic magic forms." Alante stared at him like he was insane. 10 minutes? Are you kidding me? My mana tank is completely on empty. Derek didn't miss a beat. "If you actually push yourself, you'll find some drops at the bottom." She didn't even react, completely deadpan, before he suddenly barked, "That's not an ice spear. Lock in and manifest 10 more ice spears right now." She forced herself up, gritting her teeth so hard, she was practically snarling in pure rage. Derek taunted her. "If you can't even pull this off, what the hell are you even hoping to achieve? You've got 5 shots left." Then he demanded 100 magic arrows. Elance snapped, yelling that she literally had 0 mana left. Derek completely shut her down. "No excuses. Summon the next barrage of arrows. Now." Minutes later, her legs gave out. She collapsed face first onto the dirt, desperately gasping for oxygen. Derek looked down at her battered form. "All right, you put in the work. You can go grab dinner." He crouched down. "You good, Look? If this is too much for you, throwing in the towel is always an option." Hearing that, it triggered her. Alante shot up off the ground, eyes blazing. "Quitting over a little scratch like this? You acted like this was going to be some life or death trial, but it's just basic cardio. You have no clue what I've survived in the toxic snake pit of Ebelstein High Society. This little boot camp, it's a total joke." Derek didn't flinch, his voice ice cold. "You're too blind to see the big picture." Elente stood tall, brushing off the dirt, and claimed she was just a little drained from today's drama, but would go beast mode tomorrow. "Tomorrow we're turning the dial all the way up because honestly, this wasn't even a real workout." Derek raised an eyebrow. "Tomorrow? Who said anything about tomorrow?" Elente froze. "Wait, what?" Derek stared right through her. "I'm pretty sure I told you. We're right in the middle of our evening session." A suffocating dead silence dropped between them, until Elente let out a nervous chuckle. Okay, wow. Very funny joke. Derek didn't smile. I wasn't hired to be a comedian. Boom. A new day dawned, and surprise, surprise, it kicked. Derek pushed her to the edge, barking, I know you've got more in the tank, Lady Elente. Just 5 more magic arrows. Elente pushed her limits, but she was completely gassed, letting out a painful groan. Derek was relentless. I can sense your mana. You're gonna push through 10 more arrows. Elente shrieked, losing her mind. Why the hell are you increasing the number? Derek deadpanned. If you can't run anymore, we switch back to magic training. Exhausted, she sputtered that she was totally keeping up with him, right as she dramatically flopped down into her chair. Elente was practically gasping for air, totally wiped out from the brutal workout. Derek casually checked in, asking if she was still breathing. She choked out a laugh, claiming she was actually having fun. But Derek wasn't buying it, flat out, reminding her that if this felt impossible, throwing in the towel was totally an option. Elente shot back that quitting just wasn't in her DNA, and this barely even counted as a real warm-up. Derek raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. He got to his feet, declaring that since she was so full of energy, break time was officially over, and it was time to spar. Her jaw dropped. What? She literally just sat down. Fast forward 2 weeks. A completely drained Elente turned to her friend Denise, begging her to wake her up. The second Aseline walked in. Denise agreed, and Elente instantly face-planted right onto the desk out cold. She mumbled something about being totally consumed by her hardcore magic training lately. Watching her, Denise couldn't help but ask the burning question. Why on earth was she putting herself through absolute hell? Without missing a beat, Elente whispered that it was all about winning. She just desperately needed to win. Denise stared at her in shock, then softly smiled, telling her to hang in there because she was 100% rooting for her. Right on cue, Denise spotted Aseline strolling down the hall and hissed that the reigning queen had arrived. Aseline subtly glanced their way, and Elente practically leaped out of her chair, frantically trying to fix her messy bedhead. Aseline's squad was busy hyping up some trendy new boutique that just dropped, eagerly making plans to go check out the drip together. Elente kept her eyes glued to the desk, whispering in a panic, "Is she gone?" Denise gave her a quick nod. Still stressed, Elente asked if Aseline had caught her slacking, since she was literally sprawled out like a zombie. Denise calmly flipped a page in her book, muttering that she probably flew under the radar. But in reality, Aseline definitely noticed her, silently wondering if her intel was actually accurate. Later, back at the mansion, while her maid was brushing out her hair, she dropped a massive bomb. A special delivery from the Dupin family had just arrived. Elente froze. From them, she stared at the fancy box sitting right in front of her, while the maid excitedly guessed it was a personal gift from Lady Aseline herself. The care package was stuffed with top-tier mana recovery potions. We are talking premium, crazy expensive stuff that would seriously boost her training. Elente's eyes went cold. "Dump it all in the trash," she ordered. The poor maid gasped, asking if she heard that right. Elente snapped, "Throw every single piece away so I never have to look at it again." Terrified, the maid quickly nodded, squeaking out a panicked yes before nervously suggesting they wrap up getting her ready for the day. Elente demanded to know if Derek had shown up yet. The maid confirmed he had been grinding since the crack of dawn, prepping for their next brutal session. Meanwhile, a super elegant letter circulated among the high society girls of the Rose Salon. It poetically talked about the upcoming winter and the first checking in on everyone during the freezing weather. The letter flexed about their territory, harvesting some seriously high-grade goods this season. The writer just wanted to share the wealth with her favorite girls, wrapping up with some sweet, picture-perfect wishes for a peaceful day. Signed, Aseline. Elente stood there completely lost in her own dark thoughts before marching outside to find Derek chilling at a table, lost in a book. He glanced up, noting that she was actually early for once. Elente ignored the small talk, diving straight into her warm-ups and stating she was totally done playing games. She looked him dead in the eye and demanded to know his actual price. Derek blinked, totally thrown off. Elente scoffed, saying he knew exactly what she meant. They had been grinding through this intense boot camp for weeks now. She demanded brutal honesty. What did he really think of her potential? Derek stared her down in complete silence, before bluntly stating that cutting her losses and quitting was actually a solid game, her voice trembling as she asked why he kept slapping her in the face with that same insult. Derek just stared at the ground quietly, wondering if that's really how his advice. He offered a stiff apology, but Elente wasn't having it. Quitting. Seriously, she was paying him to figure out a way to absolutely crush Lady Aseline. Wasn't that the entire point of his paycheck? She definitely didn't hire a hardcore mercenary just to get lectured about giving up. If he was just going to keep spouting that toxic negativity, otherwise he was literally just burning her precious time. Derek didn't flinch, hitting back with a harsh reality check. What happens if she literally cannot win? This insane toxic obsession with taking Aseline down was honestly just holding her back from. Sometimes the smartest move was just to swallow your pride and take the L. Tears finally spilled down Alenti's cheeks as she choked out that doing so would make her the most pathetic loser alive. Derek watched her break down in silence as she kept sobbing, confessing her deepest, ugliest truth. She screamed that she already knew she was nothing but a petty toxic hater who dragged Aseline's name through. She wasn't some gorgeous socialite or a flawless flower of the rose salon. She was literally none of those things. She was just a bitter, jealous wreck of a person. She completely lost it, bawling her eyes out and screaming that she owned up to all of it. She knew exactly how utterly worthless and trashy she was. Every single awful trait. Her whole body shook like a leaf as she confessed that there wasn't even a single logical reason for her to hate Aseline this much. She was painfully aware of it, but her crippling inferiority complex just wouldn't let her shut up and stop being toxic. Why was her brain wired this way? It was pure, unfiltered self-loathing. She desperately needed Derek to see how dead serious she was about changing, even if she had to expose her most humiliating, ugly side to do it. This dark, suffocating self-hatred had been eating her alive from the inside. And here Derek thought she was just acting out of basic jealousy or a competitive streak. Turns out she wasn't really hating on Aseline. She absolutely loathed herself. This clash wasn't fueled by some petty jealousy. It was her desperate escape from a crushing inferiority complex. Seeing this, he laid out a deal he'd do whatever it took to guarantee her absolute victory. Lady Alenti. She agreed, following his lead. Sometime later, their carriage pulled up to the estate, and her magic instructor stepped out. Scanning the sprawling Velmore County, he paused when a stranger approached to announce his arrival from Ebelstein. The instructor immediately bowed respectfully, wishing the man good health. The Count acknowledged the grueling trip and offered him a seat, confessing he hadn't laid eyes on his precious treasure in forever. "How is my Alenti doing? Is she holding up?" The instructor quickly reassured him, claiming she'd been grinding her magic practice harder than ever. Tristan flashed an arrogant smirk, boasting that nobody could ever match his Alenti's raw talent. That girl was absolutely destined to be his. The instructor forced a nervous laugh, nodding along. He was sweating bullets, knowing he couldn't mention that she was currently getting tutored by some random commoner. That bomb would ruin both him and Lady Alenti. Suddenly, Tristan turned to Velmore and announced he had some upcoming business to handle down in Ebelstein. Startled, Velmore asked what kind of business. Tristan smirked, suggesting he just drop by to see Alenti himself and give her a little surprise. The teacher plastered on a fake smile, stammering, "Oh, she would be absolutely thrilled." Internally, he was totally freaking out. Fast forward, pitch blackness consumed the outskirts of Ebelstein. Welcome to a nameless labyrinth. Feline rolled up with Derek Alenti and Jaden looking super skeptical. "Are we seriously sure about this? Is it a good idea?" Dragging Lady Alenti into a deadly dungeon. Jaden shrugged, figuring Derek had some kind of master plan. Panic hit Alenti. "He actually wants me to go inside," Derek shot back coolly, stating it was just the closest low-tier dungeon, so it should be a total breeze. Alenti stammered, "But what am I even supposed to do in there? And can we literally just stroll right in?" Derek deadpanned that she desperately needed to wake up her real combat instincts. Plus, he and the crew would be right on her tail if things went south. Freaking out, she shrieked, "Are you being dead serious right now?" Oh, he was totally serious. Derek fired back, reminding her they only had a few days left until the main combat exam. With the clock ticking down, this crash course was their only option. Swallowing her pure terror, she stared into the abyss, and the squad finally stepped inside. Peering through the gloom, she spotted nasty slime dripping down the walls and gagged. "What is that?" Derek barked at everyone to stay frosty, because even a low-level dungeon could wipe them out if they slacked off. Alenti was practically shaking. Out of nowhere, Feline hissed, "Derek, we've got multiple goblins straight ahead." Alenti choked. "Wait, what?" The protagonist nodded, catching their nasty little footsteps, while Jaden casually pointed out a massive shadow lurking behind them. "Probably an ogre." Alenti's soul left her body. A freaking ogre. Derek glanced over, asking Jaden if he could hold down that corner alone. Jaden smirked. Depends entirely on how fat my paycheck is, Derek promised. They'd settle the tab once they survived this mess. Moments later, a literal tidal wave of hideous monsters flooded their path, and reality slapped Alenti hard. These were actual bloodthirsty beasts. She started vibrating with sheer terror. The goblins instantly lunged for the boys, and Derek exploded into action, striking first. Alenti froze in absolute shock as Derek roared for Feline to lay down cover fire. He charged headfirst into the swarm, while Feline let her arrows fly, pinning a goblin right between the eyes. Without missing a beat, Derek sliced through the next ugly creature blocking his way, and the duo kept up this brutal, flawless rhythm. Just as Derek chopped down another goblin and Feline sniped another beast, Alenti's jaw hit the floor. Then, a deafening roar shattered the air right beside her. A colossal ogre loomed over her shoulder, locked onto Jaden. Jaden cracked a grin. "How much is your bounty, big guy?" The beast charged, but in a flash of steel, Jaden mercilessly hacked off all its limbs, while the remaining goblins dropped like flies. Witnessing this absolute massacre, Alenti spiraled. "What kind of nightmare is this? Are they seriously trying to get me killed? I could actually die down here. This is fake. This has to be a joke." Right then, Derek's sharp voice pierced her panic, screaming her name. He warned her a monster was charging straight for her blind spot, and ordered her to snap out of it immediately. Paralyzed by the snarling goblin, she realized her life was literally about to end. I'm dead, she chanted until Derek yelled that she had to strike it down. It hit her like a truck. She'd been acting totally pathetic her whole life. Choking on her own despair, she braced her body, remembering how that toxic inferiority complex never really faded. As the goblin leaped at her throat, the ugly truth clicked. She was just arrogant. She had literally achieved nothing by herself. All she ever did was project her jealousy and tear people down. Clenching her absolute willpower, she sparked, a blinding surge of raw magic in her palm. Finally understanding, she stepped into this dungeon to destroy her weak old self and level up. Fueled by this epiphany, she blasted the goblin, and Derek glanced over quietly, his eyes locking onto the monster's lifeless body. Alenti had completely impaled it with a magical arrow. Jaden and Feline watched in stunned silence as the creature's corpse tumbled across the cold stone. The target slammed into the wall, completely lifeless. Beads of sweat rolled down Alenti's flushed face as she shot Derek an exhausted scowl. She realized she had finally crossed a major threshold. A little while later, they collapsed onto the cold labyrinth floor to catch their breath. Meanwhile, Derek was deep into a letter. It mentioned that over 2 years had flown by since the sender left Ebelstein. The writer was currently tutoring a noble girl from Elster County. This new student was so obsessed with learning that the workload was driving her absolutely insane. The letter reminisced about the old days, wandering through Ebelstein while teaching Derek the arcane arts. It was a brutal grind back then, but honestly, it made her feel incredibly free and alive. Out of every mage she had ever crossed paths with, he was the absolute prodigy. How insane was his power level now? She demanded he show off his new skills the next time they met. The sender, his badass old mentor, Katya. It had already been a grueling 14 days since Alenti started grinding in this dungeon. Spotting him totally zoned out, Alenti raised an eyebrow. "Do you read that thing every single time we take a break?" she asked, finally dying to know what it was. He casually dropped that it was from his master. Alenti's eyes widened. "Man, she must be an absolute legend, to have the patience to put up with a guy like you." Derek just stared at her in dead silence for a second before murmuring, "Yeah, she was incredible." Flustered, Alenti stammered, I was just trying to roast you." Derek tilted his head. "Roast me about what?" Groaning, she told him to drop it. Derek smoothly changed the subject. 48 hours until the showdown, he stated. "How are the nerves?" She sighed, admitting she had absolutely no clue. But she was walking out of there with a win. A fierce competitive fire ignited in her chest. Fast forward, and a massive hyped-up crowd was packing the elite VIP section of the magical duel arena. Aseline was casually gossiping with her squad when she caught Derek strolling by out of the corner of her eye. Excusing herself from the clique, she glided over to him, calling out his name. Flashing a polite smile, she mentioned how thrilled she was to run into him. Derek gave a brief nod. "Yeah, it's been a minute." Aseline's tone shifted slightly. Word on the street is, you're personally tutoring Lady Alente. I'm managing her training right now, Derek replied flatly. An awkward, heavy silence dropped between them. Breaking the ice, Aseline chuckled, saying he hadn't changed a bit, and practically prayed he wasn't being too brutal with his new student. Nearby, Diella whispered that Derek was definitely not your average tutor, pointing out how wrecked Alente had been looking lately. Derek locked eyes with Aseline. Are you stressed about your opponent? You seem pretty confident. Flustered, Aseline quickly apologized, but Derek just frowned. Listen, no matter who you're facing, never let your guard down. Aseline visibly stiffened, swallowing her words. Over in the stands, Denise sat quietly amidst the chaotic, loudmouth friend groups, eavesdropping on everyone placing their bets on the winner. One girl scoffed confidently, declaring that Aseline had it in the bag unless Alente somehow pulled a second-star spell out of thin air. Honestly, poor Alente, she mocked. She's lost so much weight. She looks like an absolute ghost out there. Denise just flipped the page of her book in silence. Suddenly, the crowd roared, as Aseline stepped up delivering a flawless, elegant bow to the audience. The spectators were completely mesmerized by her glowing, untouchable aura. She was radiating confidence. But right at that second, Alente crashed the scene, her eyes burning with pure, unadulterated resolve. She stomped onto the battleground, radiating absolute savage energy, and silently vowed to crush this match. From the shadows, Derek watched her every move, his eyes tracking her intensely. The tension spiked as the two rivals locked eyes across the massive arena. Aseline offered a polite bow, smoothly hoping Alente was feeling up for the fight. Alente smirked, firing back that she was feeling absolutely prime. She had to admit Aseline's ice-cold composure was actually kind of impressive. Honestly, I've never been this terrified before a match in my life, Aseline confessed, her smile faltering. Alente narrowed her eyes. Less talking, more fighting. Ready? Aseline gave a sharp nod. In a heartbeat, Alente summoned a roaring crimson flame right in the palm of her hand. Aseline matched her energy, pressing her hand to her chest as massive shock waves of pure mana began radiating from both of them. Out of nowhere, Alente triggered a hyperspeed spell, launching a brutal, relentless assault that caught Aseline totally off guard. The favorite stood totally paralyzed, staring at the barrage of magical arrows flying at her face. Alente grinned, flashing back to that hellish day in the dungeon when they slaughtered waves of nightmare creatures. Derek's voice echoed in her head. If this comes down to just raw technique, you're going to get destroyed. She had panicked, begging to know the cheat code to win. His answer, pure psychotic willpower. He had tortured her in training, just to teach her how to weaponize every last drop of her mana. Panting, Alente had snapped at him back then, demanding to know if making her suffer was just his twisted little hobby. Derek deadpanned, I don't have time for hobbies. When both tanks hit zero, technique doesn't mean garbage. It's about who refuses to stay down. He had ordered her to spam her spells, to go absolutely wild, and burn through her energy as aggressively as humanly, doing whatever it takes to drag Aseline down into a filthy, exhausting war of attrition. When the smoke clears, the crown goes to the psycho who can squeeze out just one final spark of mana. Alente had hesitated, swallowing hard. But what if her max mana pool is just way bigger than mine? Derek's gaze was cold. Then you lose. Your base stats are decided the second you're born. The fierce Beliard blood pumped through her veins. She just had to trust her own crazy potential. Aseline locked onto those memories, finally getting the picture. Was the pampered Lady Alente seriously this overpowered? Without missing a beat, Alente whipped her hand up, launching a massive barrage of blazing arrows straight for Aseline's face. Despite the massive power gap, Aseline wasn't about to back down. She quickly threw up a glowing magical barrier, though a dark realization hit her, overpowering. This girl head-on was straight up impossible. Right then, the gloves completely came off. Alente went absolutely feral with her onslaught, while Aseline desperately braced herself behind her cracking energy shield. Seconds later, boom! A deafening shockwave ripped across the arena, leaving the entire crowd utterly speechless. Was this insane destruction really Lady Alente's doing? Her mana pool had basically skyrocketed off the charts. Aseline stood frozen in the dust, totally shell-shocked by the sheer devastating force of those spells. It was absolutely terrifying. But wait, she was just spamming attacks blindly. At this reckless pace, Alente's magical tank would hit dead empty in seconds. Narrowing her eyes, Aseline spotted the perfect opening. It was payback time. With a flick of her wrist, she sniped a razor-sharp magical bolt right back at her rival. But Alenti's eyes locked right onto it. Suddenly, Asaline's stomach totally dropped. No freaking way. It was a masterclass illusion. Pulling off a phantom trick that flawless required a god-tier amount of energy. In a flash, Alenti materialized right in her blind spot. Asaline whipped around, her eyes going wide with pure, unfiltered panic. Alenti's mind flashed back to her brutal training sessions with Derek. His master plan was falling perfectly into place. Step 1. Blind the enemy with a chaotic firewall. Step 2. Warp their reality with phantom clones. And the final nail in the coffin. Dash in for a point-blank lethal strike using razor-sharp ice spears. It was a dirty combo that would completely wreck even a seasoned veteran. But her opponent wasn't just some random pushover. Clocking the deadly ambush, Asaline instantly saw through the frost. But closing in this fast, she literally had zero time to chant a defensive ward. Plan B it is then. She'd have to unleash something way more savage. She grabbed her own wrist to steady her aim, just as Alenti mercilessly slammed her magical spear right into her. The sheer impact blasted Asaline straight down into the dirt. Alenti hit the ground gracefully, but her jaw practically dropped. Asaline hadn't completely wiped out. She was literally clawing into the crater, fighting the gravity of the blast. Alenti stared in absolute disbelief, totally mind-boggled by Asaline tasted the grit, knowing that was way too close for comfort. Derek's hardcore lectures echoed in her head. It doesn't matter who's standing across from you. Never hesitate. Now she finally grasped exactly what that ruthless instructor meant. Alenti's insane glow-up and unhinged combat style completely flipped the script. If the noble lady wanted to play rough, Asaline was ready to match her raw, unadulterated firepower. In a brutal slugfest, she wasn't about to take the L. Asaline's aura exploded, flooding the battlefield with violent swirling. A barrage of lethal magic missiles instantly ripped right out of the earth. The audience gasped as they realized they were looking at a massive army of ice clones, spawning that many decoys without chanting a single word. That was absolutely cracked. Watching from the shadows, Derek smirked, catching on that Asaline had kept a deadly trump card hidden up her sleeve. Alenti was completely paralyzed with shock. Even Asaline had to silently give her props. The pampered heiress had transformed into an absolute beast. But right in that split second, Alenti whipped around with a lightning-fast feint, sneaking her hands right behind her back. Asaline flashed a dangerous smirk, daring the girl to try and parry this next strike. Their fierce gazes locked. Boom! Alenti suddenly detonated a massive wave of inferno magic from her blind spot, completely swallowing Asaline in a tidal wave of heat. As the scorching pressure hit her, Asaline watched in pure horror as every single one of her icy projectiles was totally vaporized. She couldn't fathom how Alenti pulled off such a... It happened like ghost magic. Asaline hadn't sensed a single ripple in the mana pool. Had this girl seriously kept a fatal shot concealed in the shadows this entire time, saving it for the ultimate clutch moment? As the smoking wreckage crashed at her boots, Alenti let out a cocky, breathless laugh. A chilling realization hit Asaline. She couldn't predict that. She was completely in the dark about what Alenti might unleash next. The entire grandstand was losing their minds, frantically trying to process the Were these two seriously brawling on the exact same tier? The sheer godlike level of their combat was blowing everyone away. Meanwhile, Alenti gritted her teeth, praying she could act. She totally had the upper hand over Asaline right now. Right. But on the other side of the smoke, a harsh reality check smacked Asaline right in the face. Playing by these rules was a guaranteed death sentence. When it came to ruthless tactics and pure stubborn willpower, the noble lady was leaving her in the dust. Fine. If she was getting outplayed, she'd just nuke the entire board and reset the game. Up in the stands, Derek leaned forward with a wicked grin, whispering that the real bloodbath was just getting started. Asaline's body erupted in a blinding physical manifestation of pure arcane energy. Alenti froze dead in her tracks, staring down her opponent with total bewilderment. Suddenly, a violent gale whipped through the arena, forcing Alenti to throw her arms up to shield her eyes. Where the hell did this hurricane come from? This wasn't just a basic elemental spell. Her blood ran cold as the horrifying truth dawned on her. The ambient mana. It was completely gone. It was only a split-second glitch, but every drop of magical energy in the atmosphere was literally sucked dry. This was the legendary Mana Black, where an overwhelming surge of raw power completely suffocates and devours all the surrounding energy in the room. When a maid shatters their own absolute limits and overloads their core, the environment aggressively recalibrates itself. Floating in the dead center of that vacuum, Aseline began charging a blinding, apocalyptic sun right above. Plain and simple in that very breath, Aseline absolutely shattered her own human ceiling. She was summoning the legendary supernova of the second star. Staring up at the fiery doom, Alenti was violently yanked back to her grueling hell training, remembering the bitter taste of dirt as she collapsed, desperately gasped. Derek slid up next to her, handing over a bottle of water. She muttered a quick thanks, admitting she seriously doubted she could actually take Aseline down. Was weeks of grueling training really enough to pull off a win? He just calmly replied that she'd clutch the victory, or rather, she'd win from a certain twisted point of view. Cut to the arena where the entire crowd was absolutely floored. They were staring down a literal blazing inferno, a Tier 2 magic fire shield. No freaking way. Alenti's blood ran cold. It wasn't a shield, it was a massive fireball, and they were completely. Panic setting in, she whipped her head toward Derek for a game plan. His response, a dead silent stare. Alenti internally screamed, cursing his stupidly blank face. Spit out some advice, man. What a total fraud. Tears welling up, she stared at him helplessly as the roaring flames closed in. A terrified scream ripped from her throat. Her mind went completely blank. Throw up a defensive barrier. Try to tank a Tier 2 spell with an ice spear. Nah, that would just be pure suicide. Crushing someone entirely out of her league, like Aseline, felt like an impossible pipe dream. But then the entire audience held their breath at the absolute chaos unfolding. Boom. The brutal shockwave sent Alenti flying like a rag doll. Aseline flinched as the whole arena erupted into a blinding blast. Shielding her face, Alenti skipped across the dirt, tumbling violently backward. Meanwhile, Aseline was practically hyperventilating, completely spooked by the explosion. Scraping to a halt, Alenti locked eyes with her rival. Aseline's jaw dropped. Did this girl seriously just copy her own evasion technique after seeing it exactly one time? From the sidelines, Derek quietly analyzed the insane matchup playing out. Here's the catch. Tossing around Tier 2 magic without enough experience just turns the spell into a massive mana-guzzling black hole. The sheer tension had the entire audience trembling in their seats. It finally clicked for Derek. Lady Aseline had fully recognized Alenti's relentless grind and raw talent, and was now going totally all out. Dropping the hammer was her ultimate sign of respect for the stubborn girl, refusing to stay down. Gasping for air, Alenti cracked a wild smirk, completely reading Derek's mind. It was a brutal battle of attrition. If she could just survive this onslaught, the win. Refusing to let up, an enraged Aseline conjured another blazing inferno above her head, hurling it straight at Alenti. The crowd completely lost their minds. A second Tier 2 strike, and this one was flying at absolute breakneck speed. Alenti weaved frantically side to side, desperately dodging. The pressure was so intense, Aseline squeezed her eyes shut, terrified of the impact. But instead of retreating, Alenti planted her hands on the dirt and violently vaulted herself into the sky. Aseline's eyes snapped open in pure. Smirking down from above, Alenti knew exactly what she was doing. By taking to the sky, she completely shattered Aseline's ability to predict her trajectory. She instantly realized that popping a defensive shield right now would just be burning her own precious mana for absolutely nothing. So what was the play? Hitting her absolute limit. Aseline collapsed to her knees, throwing up a desperate, shimmering barrier to survive. Alenti squinted through the dust. Was that an actual structured defense, or just a messy, desperate burst of raw magic? Firing off and controlling two massive fireballs had completely drained her tank. Aseline was violently gasping, her lungs burning for air. Derek knew this was the endgame. Alenti realized her insane gamble had paid off. She had the elite noble backed into a corner, with exactly 0 mana to spare. Meanwhile, Alenti still had enough magic in the tank to fire off at least 2 more arrows or ice spears. Checkmate. She had officially dethroned Aseline. But out of nowhere, a spark ignited within Aseline's fading shield. Alenti's eyes widened in sheer panic as a final, desperate fireball violently shattered the barrier. The rogue blast zoomed right past Alenti, and the sheer recoil made Aseline utterly collapse onto the dirt, completely out of commission. Alenti stared in silence at the totally broken girl. Aseline was violently shaking, whispering a desperate plea. Just one more shot. If she could just push a little, maybe she could turn it around. She stared at her violently trembling hand, painfully aware that her magic core was completely dried up. Alenti looked down at her fallen rival, their eyes locking in a heavy, loaded stare. Aseline Dupin. It was universally accepted that no noble lady in Epstein could touch her absolute majesty. But wherever there's a blinding light, a deep shadow naturally follows. And Alenti had always been trapped in that shadow. Deep down, they thought Aseline was just another spoiled aristocrat, right? The rumors were always flying. Who did she think she was? Everyone just waited for her to snap and throw some pathetic, dramatic temper tantrum. But Aseline was a rare diamond, a gem that only sparkled brighter under the brutal pressure of being carved. And Alenti had been doomed to be eclipsed by that insane radiance, drowning in the abyss of her own inferiority. But even in that suffocating darkness, she relentlessly sharpened her own blade, grinding like crazy, so that one day she could actually surpass that golden girl, and prove to herself she could claw her way out of that endless, crushing void. And now she stood tall and totally confident, looking down at the utterly exhausted Aseline. The flawless, untouchable noble was covered in dust, her hair a messy disaster. Even after literally rolling in the dirt in front of a packed stadium, how did she still look so insanely majestic? It turns out Aseline couldn't care less about her pristine public image. She simply laid everything on the line, every single time. Suddenly, the entire arena erupted, screaming at Aseline to hold her ground, hyping her up, begging her to get back on her feet. Hearing the roaring crowd, Alenti ignited a small flame in her palm, her mind flashing back. "Derek, can I really beat her?" His cold voice echoed in her head. She'd secure the win regardless, but that was it. Even if she absolutely dominated this battle, she was always destined to end up. Aseline's palm crackled with raw magic, but then, boom, reality hit her. Alenti just casually dropped that her mana pool was totally dry. Aseline could only blink, absolutely stunned. "Wait, what?" Flashing a graceful smile, Alenti smoothly conceded. She straight up admitted she couldn't hold a candle to Lady Aseline's insane power, wrapping it up with a classy, "good fight." The second she took a deep, respectful bow, the arena absolutely erupted. The crowd went totally feral, screaming, "Lady Aseline, you're a literal..." Alenti shot her a shy, knowing smirk, her eyes sparking with hidden amusement. Meanwhile, Aseline was just standing there, utterly shook. Within seconds, a massive mob of fans swarmed Aseline, showering her with crazy praise. They kept hyping up her second star magic, totally mind-blown by the duel. But Aseline, she wasn't even listening. Her eyes were locked onto Alenti's retreating figure. Slipping into the shadows, Alenti bumped straight into Derek, who'd been watching the whole time. She threw him a cheeky grin. So he gave a low, affirming nod. Alenti chuckled, teasing him. "You're shook, right? Didn't think I had it in me to take an L with style." "Like a total queen," she bragged. "Man, you should have seen Aseline's face." Derek tilted his head, genuinely curious. "How did she take it?" Alenti laughed. Her jaw, you could read her mind like, "Wait, is she actually quitting right now?" Turns out even the ultimate ice queen can lose her cool. It was an iconic moment, honestly. And I only pulled it off because of you. Seriously, thank you. For a split second, I felt untouchable. It felt insanely good. She nudged him. "So critique my performance." The finale was kinda anticlimactic, huh? But overall, pretty solid, right? You gotta admit I'm a fast learner. And don't even think about roasting my form right now. But as she forced out the joke, hot tears suddenly spilled over her eyelashes. She stared up at Derek, her tough facade crumbling into total confusion as he stayed completely silent. Staring down at her trembling hands, her legs gave out. She collapsed onto the cold stone, ugly crying as her voice cracked. Why does it hurt so much?" She desperately tried to wipe the tears away, hating how pathetic and childish she felt. Derek knelt beside her, his voice incredibly soft. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Through the tears, she finally choked out the ugly truth. Deep down, she had wanted to win so freaking badly. But right before the final strike, "It hit me," she whispered. "Winning wouldn't magically fix anything. I'd still just be me. I'd crawl right back to my miserable reality trapped in my own skin." Meanwhile, Aseline, even when I pushed her to the absolute edge, she still looked like royalty. The only thing I actually beat Aseline at is having a massive inferiority complex. Derek let out a breath, his gaze turning distant. "I'm exactly the same way, you know. So what if you look a little pathetic right now? Who cares?" Alenti snapped her head up. her tear-stained eyes locking onto his. Derek held her gaze, dropping a heavy truth. Listen to me. If you don't have the guts to look pathetic and fail, you're never going to level up. Letting his words sink in, she let the last of her tears fall, replaying the chaotic duel in her head. For the first time ever, she wasn't just stuck in the mud. She was fine. Meanwhile, Lady Denise had been quietly observing the aftermath. Catching the vibe, she gracefully excused herself from Asseline's inner circle. She casually dropped that the match had been an absolute thriller. As Asseline gave a polite nod of thanks, Denise hit her with a knowing smile. Another flawless victory for you, Seriously, watching you guys trade blows gave me literal goosebumps. But Asseline's eyes were deadly serious. Lady Denise, you saw right through it, didn't you? You know I didn't actually win that fight. Denise's lips curved into a mysterious smirk, offering absolute silence. The heavy, unspoken truth hung between. Finally, Denise broke the tension. In terms of pure mana reserves, you're definitely in a completely different league. But Asseline shook her head, a bitter taste in her mouth. Raw power wasn't nearly enough to bridge the insane gap in pure skill. Elenti completely outplayed me on every single level. To level up that drastically in just a few days, it's practically impossible. Suddenly, an image of Derek's intense gaze flashed through her mind. Without skipping a beat, she snapped her fingers, summoning her loyal maid Daisy. Yes, my lady. Right away. Draft an urgent letter to the main estate. I need to get my hands on Derek. Flash forward to the crack of dawn. Lord Raymond was already interrogating his son. What in the world is a 6-star heavy hitter doing lurking around Evilstein? Valerian crossed his arms, his face totally grim. We're completely in the dark on that. But get this, the customs treaty got fast-tracked, almost definitely because of Sir Dress making moves. He paused, his gears turning, as he pieced the puzzle together. I've been wrecking my brain trying to figure out why Count Belmiard suddenly rolled into our territory. This has to be the missing link. When a master tracker who literally possesses the gift of foresight makes a move like this, it's never a coincidence. There's a massive hidden... Switching gears, Valerian brought up a bizarre request from his sister. By the way, she just sent an urgent letter begging me to hunt down a new magic tutor for her. Raymond scoffed. Seriously? Can't we just hire literally anyone else? Valerian sighed, rubbing his temples. Nope, she was... But here's the catch. He's currently locked up at the Belmiard estate, acting as a personal magic coach for Lady Elenti. A wicked, calculating grin spread across Raymond's face as he toyed with the idea of dispatching their head butler to strike a deal. Actually, scratch that, he declared, his eyes gleaming with ambition. I've got pending business out there anyway. I'll just handle the negotiations myself. Fast forward to sunset. Elenti and Derek were chilling at the dining table, the heavy tension from earlier totally gone. She stretched out, absolutely exhausted. Magic theory can wait. She just wanted to clear her head. Leaning on her chin, she casually asked, So you're going to stick around and keep running missions for the Merc Guild, right? Derek gave a relaxed nod. Beneath the table, she playfully tapped his boot with her foot, leaning in just a fraction closer. Looking up through her lashes, she murmured softly, So, when she flat out asked him to be her magic tutor, a heavy silence hung in the air, before he finally dropped a cool, yeah. Deep down, though, dude was totally clueless if he actually had anything to teach her. Elenti just hit him with that side eye like, oh my god, since when are you this insanely humble? Fast forward, the freezing winter was finally packing its bags. Man, it felt like an eternity, right? A hot minute later, Derek strolled right back into the local tavern, and Feline's face lit up as she screamed his name. Jaden locked eyes with him too. Flashing a smirk, Derek announced that he had officially returned. The very next morning, a super fancy carriage carrying the Count rolled into the city. Meanwhile, Elenti was totally knocked out in bed until this chaotic noise woke her up, causing her to furiously jam a pillow over her face and let out a muffled groan. Literally, she had strictly declared today a 0-lesson maximum chill day. Her maid nudged her, whispering that she seriously needed to go check out the commotion. Dragging herself up, Elenti snapped. Why didn't you just lie and say I ghosted? Did the maid completely tune her out? She started ranting about how from today on, she was done. But before finishing her sentence, she yanked the door open and her jaw dropped. The dude was absolutely buzzing with hype to see her practically crying about how long it had been. He went full dad mode, calling her his pride, his flawless pearl. His ultimate treasure, panic mode activated. Alenti instantly slammed the door shut, freaking out over why on earth her dad crashed her place. Taking a deep breath, she whipped the door back open, slapped on a painfully fake smile, and asked what brought him all the way out to the boonies. She frantically begged for just 1 minute to get changed, told him to chill out there, and then bam! She slammed the heavy wooden door right in his face, again. The Count just stood there muttering, "My sweet love, my precious treasure." Later, as they grabbed a bite for breakfast out in the courtyard, the Count rubbed his chin, guessing that this young lady Aseline was probably a total powerhouse rival. Alenti just nodded, admitting she had genuinely leveled up a ton while vibing, and hearing that the Count dropped a massive bombshell. If this mercenary guy was such a top-tier mentor, wouldn't it be way better to just lock him down and keep him exclusively in their city? Alenti was totally shook, warning him that the city's vassals would throw an absolute fit, but her dad just threw his head back and laughed, telling her not to stress. Like, was there anything he wouldn't conquer for his little girl? He told her to just blindly trust her old man. Alenti's cheeks flared red with embarrassment, but honestly she put all her hopes in him. A hot minute later, the crew found themselves thrown right back into the gritty labyrinth for another chaotic run, when Feline suddenly started screeching at Derek that a massive monster was creeping up behind. Catching the desperate warning, Derek flared up his mana, but out of nowhere this super weird heavy sensation washed over him, and tapping deep into his core, he actually sensed the spark of a third star. He instantly unleashed a blazing firewall, completely engulfing himself in a blinding, radiant glow. Feline shrieked his name in absolute terror, and an earth-shattering roar ripped through the air so deafening that it literally sent entire flocks of birds. Once evening hit, the squad dragged themselves back to the tavern, completely freaking out over how Derek was inches away from being unalived. Feline snapped at Jaden to shut up and not even bring it up. Like, seriously, are all mages this unhinged? Why on earth was he trying to flex mega-powerful third-star spells, while Derek casually brushed it off, explaining that right in the heat of battle, he just felt this overwhelming wall of inadequacy hitting him, totally giving him flashbacks to that grueling grind when he first unlocked his second star. Out of nowhere, someone behind him whispered not to stress over hitting a plateau and told him to stop forcing it so hard. I mean, hasn't the ancient school of sorcery always been about letting the magic flow naturally? But real talk. That kind of Zen advice was pure garbage when you were cursed with harsh limits like his. He literally couldn't feel a single trace of magical, yet the absolute legend, standing right in front of his eyes, was undeniably the very first and greatest Starseeker in history. The mysterious dude slowly pulled back his hood, revealing himself as a straight-up wandering spirit. Looking right at him, he casually asked that if he had any decent booze on hand, he should. Later that evening, Diella was out grinding her magic skills, right in the middle of the gritty streets, channeling the raw mystical energy floating around her. Glaring into the darkness, she completely fueled her rage, and manifested a glowing magic arrow, but suddenly, her brain short-circuited. The deadly arrow literally turned to dust a split second later, and she completely lost her mind, shrieking into the night. What the heck is this garbage? This was beyond frustrating. She literally and just then, Reg casually strolled up to her. Smirking, he roasted her, saying he thought she'd had a major glow-up, but her toxic attitude was still. Startled, she whipped around and yelled, "Since when did you manage to sneak up on me?" Reg just shrugged, pointing out that she actually managed to conjure 5 of those arrows, thanks to a seriously cracked mentor after all. She let out a cocky laugh, completely brushing it off, by saying it was just because she was naturally a prodigy. And seriously, what did that completely even have to do with it? Reg casually dropped the T, saying rumor had it that Aseline was dead set on hiring that exact arrogant jerk as her personal magic coach. Diella's eyes went wide as she let out a piercing shriek. Wait, what? There is literally no way that's real. What if he ends up treating her the exact same way he treated me? Reg quickly shushed her, warning her not to spout nonsense that would make people totally misunderstand Derek. Reg also spilled that he'd recently heard Lady Alenti was absolutely desperate to keep Derek serving her too. Diella was straight up malfunctioning, utterly baffled as to why this guy was suddenly the most popular dude in town. And without missing a beat, Reg hit her with the cold, hard truth. He literally took a totally clueless lackey like her and turned her into an actual threat. So duh. It was no wonder he was so hyped up. Diella completely lost it, screaming at the top of her lungs. What did you just call me? I mean, Yeah, okay, that technically happened. And Reg pushed again, asking, wouldn't it actually be a massive win if Derek chose Aseline's squad? At least that way, she could possibly finally reunite with the exact same Derek she was secretly dying to see again. Her face instantly turned violently red as she shrieked, who in their right mind said I wanted to see that total idiot? Reg just smirked, throwing his hands up in mock surrender and teased, yeah, sure, totally. I'll just take. Word about Derek had definitely spread like wildfire by now. He was just praying all this hype wouldn't drag a massive wave of new tryhards into the mix.